it's a problem. And I'm like, well, I need to fix it.
Too much ice up in Tromsø.
So much ice up in Tromsø. It's actually warmer up there than here now.
It is?
Mhm.
How many degrees?
+6.
Mm.
And here it's +3.
Oh, yeah. But tell me about it. We're rolling, by the way.
We are?
Yeah, now we are. Eden, welcome to my podcast here. Thank you for coming here to Oslo and to my podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And you were mentioning, just as we met, you wanted to open with some words just in the start of the podcast here.
Yeah. So thank you so much for having me here today. And I would like to dedicate this episode and our time here to the memory of two of my relatives, Nadav Goldstein-Almog and Yam Goldstein-Almog, a father and daughter who were murdered by Hamas on October 7th. So I would like to just dedicate this podcast to them and their memory.
Yes. Can you tell me about them? Were they at the kibbutz or at the Nova? Or
So Nadav was a brilliant athlete, loved by many. And Yam, she was a soldier in the IDF, also a brilliant child, super smart, super kind, loved by all. And on October 7th, Hamas terrorists broke into their house and killed Nadav in front of Chen, the mom, and the three, and all the children, actually. And then the terrorists took the kids and then shot Yam in the face and killed her. And then they took the mom, Chen, and kidnapped them to Gaza, and they were held there for 51 days. And then they were returned in the hostage deal.
Wow.
Yeah.
How have they told you about what it was like being there and getting to be freed from there as hostages?
So they're some of the most well-known hostages, unfortunately. There are a lot of interviews with them in the media, in English, in Hebrew. You can Google them. Everyone listening can Google them, the Goldstein-Almog family. And they share a lot there. And both Chen, the mom, and Agam, the eldest child, or second eldest, who's now the eldest, they're dedicating every single minute outside of Gaza to helping return the other hostages there. So, yeah.
But how are they doing? How are they holding up? Do you know? It must be, I can't even imagine what that must be like to go through that and still be able to be on your feet. And then in addition, doing all that work, doing all that important work for the other hostages.
I think they're honestly two of the strongest women I know. I can't even begin to imagine what they're going through. I can tell you that when I heard that they were taken hostage, I couldn't breathe for 51 days and I couldn't function for 51 days. So I can't even imagine what it's like for them, seeing what they've seen back home and then being kidnapped to Gaza and then being there. And during their time there, they stayed with a Gazan family and then they were moved to a supermarket and a school and they were moved a lot of times and they actually got to see different places, different people. And at some point, their captors told them, do not return to Kfar Aza, do not return to your home, go to Tel Aviv or leave Israel because we will be back one day. So for your own sake, you seem nice, we like you as much as we can, so go away, don't return.
Wow.
So, yeah.
It's so difficult to grasp that whole setting, 7th of October and everything that has happened. And in addition, the other dimensions of it, seeing it from Norway and seeing it from Europe and the West. And it's difficult to grasp the whole thing. But how do you remember where you were on the 7th of October? How was your experience with this?
So on October 7th, 2023, I was in Tromsø where I live. It was snowy and beautiful. The sun was actually still out. It was right before the polar night began. So I got to see snow and sun at the same time. And then I woke up half an hour before having to leave home to go meet a friend for coffee. And I woke up to 5 messages, all from international friends texting me, is your family safe? How are your father and sister doing? Are all of your friends okay? Have you heard? Have you checked the news? If you haven't, go check the news ASAP. And I woke up to that. And I know that usually my foreign friends, they're a lot more hysterical because being from Israel, I know what it's like. And then what you see in the media is very often It's over portrayed, or it's not the same as the reality of actually being there. So it's like over dramatized. So I thought to myself, oh, they're probably just being hysterical as usual. It's probably just, I don't know, the usual, someone just got stabbed somewhere. Or, you know, someone decided to fire a few rockets, but it will end. Like I've lived through that my whole life. It's just going to end. It's going to be fine. And then I opened the news. And then I realized that we can't contact the family in Kfar. And then I realized that this is bigger than what I thought, but I still didn't grasp how bad it was going to get. And then I met my friend for coffee, and then I went straight to work. And then the next day at work, my sister called me and she said, Eden, you have to sit down. And I asked her, why? Like, I'm at work. What's up? You're calling me 3 times. Like, why are you disturbing me? And she said, Eden, you have to sit down. We have news. And I asked her about the family, and she said, yes. And then initially, they said that all 6 family members were murdered. So I just sat down and I couldn't stop crying for a solid 2 hours, just sobbing. And then luckily, a few weeks later, we got the message that no, only 2 were murdered and 4 were held in Gaza as hostages.
But that was a few weeks later, so you didn't even know for a couple of weeks.
It took a while. And the family, for example, they waited with the funerals until they actually got a confirmation that the 4 surviving ones were in Gaza. Yeah. Because after October 7th, it was so difficult to identify a lot of the bodies because of what Hamas and other terrorists from, you know, the Islamic Jihad and other also civilians who crossed the border. Like the atrocities committed by the Palestinians, the broader Palestinians who entered Israel that day. It was so difficult to identify some of the bodies, and still today, like a year and a bit later. So the family just didn't know if they were just unidentified or if they were actually alive. And then as soon as they heard that they were alive, they said, okay, we have to bury the 2 confirmed dead ones and just move on with our lives.
It's just unthinkable. But how were those weeks for you? Like from the moment that you heard about this, the first phone call, and then those couple of weeks where you didn't know anything, where you?
I could barely function.
Yeah.
So I'm an Israeli Jew, born and raised in Israel. I moved to Norway 4.5 years ago, to the Arctic, far, far away from everything else. For 3 years, I was one of the northernmost Jews in the world, living in Alta. The nearest Jews were 7 hours away in Tromsø. So I was completely alone even before that. And then when I moved to Tromsø, at least I knew that there were other Israelis and Jews up there.
And you can see this on our Jew radar. We always say, people don't know this, but we have a Jew radar where we can see the nearest Jews in the world.
Yeah.
Of course.
You know, we know everything.
Yeah.
You know, world domination and whatnot.
Yeah.
No, it's like I knew that there were other Jews and Israelis, or as I like to call us, Jewsraelis in one word. So I knew I'm not entirely alone, but I didn't know how many and who they are and where they are, because in Norway, people don't understand this. Not foreigners, not Israelis, not Norwegian people. Jewish people in Norway, they're terrified of saying that they're Jewish.
Yeah.
We're 1,500. We're nothing. We're a tiny, tiny group. We are officially recognized as a national minority, so we should be more well-known, but we're terrified of saying who we are because of how bad anti-Semitism is here. So I knew that there were other Jews in Tromsø. I just didn't know how to reach them because everyone, like if I ask my friends and colleagues, hey, do you know anyone who's Jewish? They will say, no, we only know of the 17 dead Jews who died in the Holocaust, were sent to Auschwitz, and we know where they used to live because of the golden stones. That's all we know. So people know that we exist, but it's impossible to reach us because we're so good at hiding, which is horrible. So for me, I felt extremely alone. I knew that there were other people there that I just couldn't reach. I wanted to go home, be with my family, but my family is from the north of Israel. So we were forced to evacuate our home by the military. So my family is effectively homeless. My father and sister and grandmother and cat, lovely cat, they've been homeless officially since the 16th of October, 2023. So I wanted to go home and be with my friends and family, but where would I go? I'd be homeless.
Nobody's talking about this, the Israeli refugees from their own homes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's 60 or 70,000 from the north, but a few dozen thousands refugees, internal refugees, and no one talks about that.
It's not interesting, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
So I couldn't go home and be with my friends there. I couldn't be with Jews in Tromsø. And you yourself, you often say that you're an October 8th Jew.
Yeah.
So a lot of Jewish people, like they woke up
Yeah.
and started to find community or reconnect to their Jewish
Yes.
identity. So you understand, you of all people understand the importance of community and society.
Definitely. Yeah.
I didn't have that being so far up north and so isolated. And then a lot of the people I thought were my friends decided that we're no longer friends.
We have to talk about that. What happened? And in what way did you feel that?
So I'm a master's student at the moment. I study a degree called Indigenous Studies. So everything about all indigenous people around the world, but with a focus on the Arctic. And it's a really cool degree. But we're a very small class. And some of my classmates told me, like straight up came to me and said, you're a white colonizer. Your family deserved to die on October 7th because you shouldn't even be there.
They told you that?
They told me that to my face.
Norwegians?
No, international.
International, so not ethnically Norwegian.
No.
Okay.
Foreign students living in Norway, studying in Norway.
Do you know where they were from? Which
Yeah.
countries?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it doesn't matter for
Okay.
now.
Yeah,
But yeah, they told me straight to my face that I'm a white colonizer. And it's very funny when it comes from people who come from European countries with a history of colonization.
Yeah.
Like Spain and France and Italy and the UK and also Norway. Like every time people from those countries tell me that I'm a white colonizer, I'm like, well, have you looked at yourself recently?
Yeah.
But anyhow, so that was difficult in class. It was difficult because a lot of my Norwegian and Sami friends, to those of the listeners who are unaware or unfamiliar with the Sami people, they're officially the only recognized indigenous people in Europe. And they live in Norway, Sweden, Finland, and the Kola Peninsula in Russia. So they're indigenous too. And Jewish people are indigenous. So we bonded over being indigenous together.
Yeah.
And then after October 7th, a lot of my indigenous friends said, no, you're a white colonizer. Or Palestinian people are indigenous and you're not. Because apparently two things can't be true at the same time.
Even Sami people told you?
Sami people. Other indigenous people told me that I am no longer indigenous because the narrative that they got to hear was that I'm a white colonizer. And they started to believe that over me, a person they've known for 3, 4, 5 years. So they started to believe everything other people have told them, but not me.
That's so disappointing.
Really disappointing. I felt betrayed, disappointed, lost. Like, I felt so bad.
Because it's so disappointing on so many levels, right? For the first of all, they're studying like Indigenous Studies, so they should know better. Like that's their field of study. And second of all, they're also an Indigenous group, so they should understand that. And third of all, because you've been friends for so many years, so you know each other. Like on so many levels, that's just so wrong. But how? When these people told you that, and the other people told you that about 7th of October and your family dying and how you deserved all that stuff, how did you respond?
Well, I had many different responses. At first, I was just shocked, I guess, and very, very angry. I think there are many different levels and phases for grief. And I think I was just very shocked and very angry at first. So when people told me that, I was like, no, you are, or no, look at yourself, or I don't want to talk about this, or you understand nothing. Like, you're not from there, so don't talk to me about things you don't understand. And then later on, I became more understanding in a way. Like, I don't think anyone should justify the death of my relatives or me and my family being displaced. No, I don't think so. But I have more empathy and compassion and understand why people think the way they think. I don't agree with it, but I understand where they come from, which is why
the mechanisms.
I understand the mechanisms and I understand the power play and I understand why people think the way they think, like the whole infrastructure behind why they think the way they think, which is why after October 7th, I've dedicated pretty much all of my existence, apart from being a student and working full-time, to educating people and speaking with people about the situation in order to combat the narrative that's common and based on lies and propaganda, and to promote understanding and growth.
That's great. That's such a Jewish response to crisis too. It's like, what can we do to make things better?
Yeah, so solution oriented. Always like, how can I fix this?
And not just fixed, make it even better than it was.
Exactly. In Norway, we have this concept of when you go hiking, you have to leave nature cleaner than what you found it when you got there. So my goal in life is to leave the world a better place, a safer place for everyone, not just like Jewish people and Israeli people or indigenous people, everyone. We all share the same world. We all live in the same planet. We all have like shared responsibility for whatever is going on here. And I don't think enough people understand that. So my goal is just to promote more understanding and openness and acceptance. And you do that by talking to people, which is why I'm so happy that you invited me here.
Thank you. It's like all of this that you're saying, what we're talking about here, just flies in the face of how Jews and Israelis are portrayed, especially in the Norwegian media, as like, seems like if we take Netanyahu as an example, it seems like he's just portrayed as he just loves the blood of civilian Palestinians. He just loves to kill people just for fun. It's like, almost like a projection of Hamas, right? Because all of these things apply for Hamas, and then they've just shifted the whole narrative and just portray that onto the Jews, onto Israel as the scapegoat, as the forever scapegoat, right? Eternal scapegoat. Is it? How do you feel about that? Having experienced it, it's so up and close with your own family, and being in Norway and feeling that kind of upside down world.
So, I think in order to answer this, I think we should actually dive deeper into what anti-Semitism is.
Let's do it.
And anti-Zionism, so people can understand what actually it is. And
That's
then
for your tea, by the way.
Thank you.
Let's dive into that.
A lot of people nowadays, they say, no, we're not anti-Semites, we're only anti-Zionists. But what is anti-Semitism? What is Zionism even? So anti-Semitism is a word that was invented, artificially created by a German guy in 1879 in order to replace Judenhass, or Jew hatred, and make it more scientific and make it more acceptable. Because then you can say, oh, I suffer from anti-Semitism. Like it's a condition. It's something that you can quantify, you can measure, you can make it scientific, you can make it known, and then you can spread the concept of anti-Semitism. Nowadays, there isn't a single definition for what anti-Semitism is. It's very complex and multi-layered, but basically, any form of discrimination against Jewish people based on their religion or ethnic background, any form of prejudice against us, and a lot of blood libels and misconceptions. And some people say it's only related to Jewish people, and some people say it's Jewish people and everyone associated with them. So when I was in a relationship with a Norwegian, some people would say that by treating me badly and being anti-Semitic towards me, that's one thing. But if they would start to say, oh, you're bad because you're dating a Jew, or you're this or you're that, like they would project their hate from me onto him, for example. Anti-Semitism is it's a unique form of hatred. It's the only form of hatred in the world where the victim is both too strong and too weak at the same time, which is extremely unique. It doesn't happen in any other case. So Jews are super strong, super smart. We control the banks, we control the media, we control everything. We're this like evil mastermind nation just trying to get control and do everything. At the same time, we're subhuman, we're vermins, we're evil, we're ugly looking, we're smelly, we kill Christian children and drink their blood for Pesach or Passover. So we're both too strong and too weak. And you can never win because it's like a catch-22 situation. You can never win. And anti-Semitism has been around for centuries, for millennia. And people don't understand how deeply rooted in all culture anti-Semitism is. Since we're in Europe, and since European culture and colonialism and imperialism influence a big part of the world, I will focus on like European anti-Semitism. But it's been everywhere. The church promoted it, scapegoated the Jews for everything. It's in folk tales and fairy tales, everything. It's everywhere, and people don't realize how many anti-Semitic small things exist in their lives today. that are based on things that happened 400, 500, 700 years ago. For example, when you think of a witch, like describe a witch physically. What
First
does a
thing
witch
that
look
pops
like?
to mind, long nose, obviously, hooded, crooked, and a little bit older, and hiding around in the woods, always in the woods,
Hmm.
in the shadows, right? That's like the archetype of a witch.
And she's a woman, of course.
Yeah.
And the female witch is bad, but the wizard is nice and smart and strong. So that was a really nice move. The church back then, they did something really smart. People tend to think that Jewish people, people don't know the history of Jewish people. They think they do, but they don't. So Jewish people, we've been exiled from our ancestral homeland for a while, a really long while. And then we were forced to go places. So we were spread out against our will all over the world. And we ended up in Europe. Ashkenazi Jews were descendants of Judean or Jewish slaves taken by the Romans to build the Colosseum in Rome. We're both of us, Ashkenazi Jews.
Yeah, we built that. Wow.
We're very good builders. We built the pyramids, we built the Colosseum. Like,
Awesome.
good job, us, you know?
Oh my God.
Forced labor. But we're descendants of Jewish slaves that were brought to Europe against their will. Like, we didn't just choose to come here. After we were forced to be brought here, we tried to do whatever we could to survive. But Jewish people were marked in Europe as different. They were forced to live in their own secluded ghettos or neighborhoods.
Shtetls.
Yes, and ghetto. Like living outside the city walls, where people could kill them whenever they wanted, or even within the city walls, but in their own neighborhoods. They were not allowed to mix with the mainstream population.
Do you have any idea why, or some theories why? Is it because people were scared, or what
People
was
were
it?
scared.
Yeah.
There were no other like non-European, non-Christian people in Europe, especially after Ferdinand and Isabella, the monarchs of Spain, kicked all the Muslims out of Europe and tried to convert all the Jews to Christianity or killed them in the Inquisition. So the Jewish people were the only foreigners back then. So
And they kept to themselves a little bit. They had their own traditions, their own religion, and they were really good at stuff. Like, so they were scary for society. Like, what if they come and take our jobs? What if they come and, was it like that, both xenophobia and at the same time fear of the economy of their own because they knew that the Jews were good at stuff?
So back then, Jewish people were not legally allowed to own land.
Yeah.
So for example, Jewish people couldn't be farmers. They were forced to pursue occupations like medicine or being tailors or goldsmiths, or the Catholic Church refused to handle money.
Yeah.
Because money is filthy, money is dirty, it makes you think unholy thoughts. So who were the only non-Christian people in Europe at the time? The Jews. That's where the whole Jews are good with money stereotype comes from. Jewish people were forced to become bankers and loaners in order to survive. Like, they had no other choice. But also Jewish people were marked. Not only did they have to live in their own secluded neighborhoods or villages or towns, but they also had to wear a hat called Judenhut, a pointy hat.
Oh yeah. When was this? Well, do you know which year?
The 12th to 1500s.
Really?
Mhm.
Oh my
So for
God.
almost 300 years. So
I want
nowadays,
one of those hats. I want to walk around with it.
like, look at me.
I'm
Yeah.
a pointy Jew.
I'm a pointy Jew. And the reason for that was that other hats were a lot shorter and flatter. So the Jews would wear the pointy hat, which was very tall, so you could spot them from afar and choose to go to the other side of the street, for
But
example.
why do you think it was important to be able to spot the Jew?
Because
Why?
Jews are evil, obviously.
Evil, yeah. Already back then,
Of
we're
course.
evil. Yeah.
Of course, we're evil, you know?
Yeah.
So nowadays, you and I and many people, when we think of Jews being marked, we think of the yellow star of David during the Holocaust.
Yeah.
So today, if you would see someone wear a yellow star, what's the first thought you're going to have? Jew and Holocaust, right? Automatically. Back then, many people in Europe knew pointy hat, Jew. So the church took hatred of women and being scared of women, and women are filthy, and also the original sin with Eve corrupting Adam and everything. So like, women are horrible, of course. They took that, and then they took Jew hatred or anti-Semitism, and they combined them. So witches, stereotypically, they look like me. White skin, dark, curly hair. really big nose. Mine is a bit smaller than the stereotype.
And they have pointy hats.
Pointy hats.
Oh my God.
Pointy
I didn't
hats.
think about that.
They try to kill Christian children in all the folktales. It's Christian children that need to be aware of them.
Like the folktale Hansel and Gretel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And in the original folktale, the witch lives in a house full of money and gold and jewelry. So she is greedy and she wants to kidnap and kill the blonde Aryan German children. So while it wasn't specifically written that witch is a Jewish woman, that's something called Jew coding. You can deduct, by connecting the dots, you can deduct that a character is Jewish or a person is Jewish based on enough characteristics.
You know what I just realized? When you celebrate a birthday, people have birthday hats, it's pointy hats. Maybe that has something to do with it.
I don't know. But I do know that like the whole witch archetype is based on anti-Semitic libels and stereotypes. Definitely. And imageries. So people are unaware of that.
Yeah.
And you can really see it in two perfect examples from Disney films. Well, Disney himself, he was an anti-Semite. Yeah. So with Snow White, the first like proper full-length animated movie, if you look at the witch, she's very vain. She wants to kill Snow White because she wants power, she wants beauty, she's very selfish. And then when she transforms into like the witch who wants to poison her, she looks like all the anti-Semitic caricatures of Jews from the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And you like, I don't know if you can visualize it right now, but like she looks like that. And also in Tangled, the Rapunzel story or the film from 2010, the animators openly said, we tried to make Mother Gothel the evil one. We tried to make her blonde. We tried to make her with light brown hair. We tried to change the facial features. It didn't work. So we had to change and change and change because she didn't look evil enough. Like they openly said, she did not look convincingly evil. And then the final product they ended with is someone who looks like me.
Yeah.
She looks stereotypically Jewish. A lot of the songs, a lot of the lyrics, a lot of the things you see in Tangled, they play on anti-Semitic stereotypes. And then at the very, very end of the film, she also looks even more hideous and repulsive because, of course, Jews are subhuman. Again, she's so strong. She kidnaps Rapunzel, but then she's so weak and subhuman and, you know, horrible and all of that. Yeah. Both. And all of my Jewish and Israeli friends around the world, they watched Tangled and they were like, oh, that's us. Like, Disney, what happened?
Yeah.
And all of my non-Jewish friends didn't realize it until I came to them and I said, have you noticed that? And they're like, oh. So that's just a perfect example of how deeply rooted anti-Semitism is in our popular culture and mainstream culture and how dangerous it is because people don't even understand that nowadays they associate white Ashkenazi Jewish features with being a Jew, with being bad. If you don't look stereotypically European Jewish, like you might be okay. But if you don't look like me, you might be a fine person. But if you look like me, you're evil, automatically evil. And that's something people just don't understand. Like how easy it is to just like mess with people's brains, just based on things that like seeds that were planted 700 years ago, 800 years ago in Europe, and spread throughout the entire world.
Wow. But it's nice to be able to sit here, just the two of us, two subhuman evil persons sitting here talking together about this. But do you think there's, like, speaking of anti-Semitism, do you think a lot of anti-Semitism is subconscious, that you don't even realize it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Much more than like conscious, because it's rare that I feel like I meet people who are consciously anti-Semites. Nowadays, a little bit more because I see it in the comments.
Now it's popular.
It's popular, right? But I think a lot of it is subconscious, like you don't even know it yourself what you're doing.
Exactly, and that's why I think it's really important, and that's why I always try to tell people just how crazy anti-Semitism is, and like the history of anti-Semitism, like examples from popular culture as well, because people don't even understand that when they talk about things, they already have prejudice against Jewish people in their upbringing, in their childhood already. So they don't even understand. And then anti-Semitism is like a virus that's very easy to wake up whenever you need it. And historically, if you look at times of political or economic or social unrest, usually some very big leader will say, oh, look, the Jews.
Yes.
We're always the scapegoats. and usually when things are bad.
But
Like
why
if
are
things
we
are
always the
okay,
scapegoat? Why did they turn to us?
because again, we're the easiest to hate,
The easiest target.
the easiest target. We're super strong and super weak at the same time.
And it's something that everybody can rally around. Yeah, it's
And
probably
it's,
them.
and it's been around for hundreds of years. Like it's very easy to play on something that's been there for ages.
Like, because I've always thought, before I learned a lot about this, before I like put my mind to it, I always thought that there are lots of indigenous groups. Like you have the Romani people, you have the what do you call the Gypsy people, you have a lot of different
The
groups.
Sami, the Inuit.
Lots of ethnic groups. Like, why not them? Like, why weren't they picked out to be like the global kind of conspiratorial group that was the scapegoat of all eternity? Like, it could have been any other group, but why the Jews? Why not all of those guys?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, we have to understand Christianity. So, in English, there is a difference between being Jewish and being Judean. Two different terms. Our people, they come from the kingdom of Judah or Judea, which is our ancestral homeland. Back then, many thousands of years ago, there were two kingdoms, the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah or Judea. The kingdom of Israel was conquered, colonized, people were spread. That's where the whole archetype of the 10 lost tribes came from.
Yeah.
And then there was the kingdom of Judah that survived. Every single person from that kingdom was a Judean. Now, since Jewish people are indigenous people, there is no, or there used to be no proper difference or no easy way to differentiate between our religion, our spirituality, and our way of life. Everything is interconnected. And we didn't have a name for our religion. You'd say Jewish people, like Judean people, what do they practice? Judaism. Same word in Hebrew, in Latin, in Spanish. Jewish and Judean is the same. But in English, it's not. Why? When Christianity came around, and Jesus himself, he was a Judean, and he followed the religion of the Judeans. He just wanted to modify it and adapt it to modern times, or relatively modern times back then. A lot of the Judeans were angry and said, no, we don't accept you, and we don't accept your teachings. And he was a very, very wise man, and they just didn't accept him. And then his disciples said, okay, your religion is an ethno-religion. You're an indigenous group of people. Therefore, your connection to the land, your understanding of the world around you is limited to your exact location here in your ancestral homeland. We would like the teachings of Jesus to be global. So we need to turn it into a universal religion. And so if he was Jewish and we're Jewish or Judean, then we need to create a differentiation between being ethnically Judean and following the Judean belief system. So they are the ones who created the whole division and the whole separation between being ethnically Judean, indigenous, and following a religion. Like today, you have Sami people who are Christian. You have Inuit people who are Muslim. Like you have people from indigenous backgrounds following other religions.
Yeah.
Back when they were first contacted by the colonizers, they followed their own belief system. Same for us. So then when Christianity became its own religion, it was very easy to say, oh, the Jews are evil. The Judeans are evil because they're the ones who rejected the teachings of Jesus Christ. They're the evil ones. And then started scapegoating us.
Yeah.
And then one of the popes, I don't remember who, his disciples came to him and they asked him, why are you allowing Jewish people to live in Europe? And he said, like, why shouldn't we just kill all of them? Because they're all sinners and horrible people. We should just kill all of them.
Fair point.
And he said, no, because they are so horrible that they should forever live in misery. So we have to keep them alive, but barely alive. Like treat them worse than animals, worse than anything. We have to just keep them alive at like so little above dead that they forever continue to exist in misery. And that's the only right punishment for their crimes for rejecting the teachings of Jesus.
Like death isn't enough. Like you have
Death
to suffer.
isn't enough, and you have to suffer for eternity, which is why then the Jews were treated as subhuman and they were not allowed to own property or be citizens or have equal rights in Europe, because we were seen as people who were like told by God, like someone told the Pope, God told the Pope that we deserve to be punished for eternity. Me, you, our great grandchildren, 1,000,000 years from now, we all deserve to be punished. So of course, it's understandable.
And that prophecy almost came true as well, I would say. Like, if you look at history, like, yeah, we are punished for eternity. We still thrive anyway, but still is like, but what about the Old Testament? Didn't they read that? Didn't they read like the Jews are the chosen people and all these things? Like, didn't they care about that? How could they?
But then we rejected Jesus, who was one of the chosen people.
Yeah.
And by rejecting him, we lost the favor of God. So we are no longer the chosen people. We are the chosen people in the sense that Jesus, he was born a Judean.
Yeah.
So God did choose us. He chose Mary, or Miriam in their Hebrew name, to give birth to, the Son of God, or, the Holy Trinity. So he is everything and nothing at the same time. We are the chosen ones, but we're no longer the chosen ones because we fell out of favor with God.
So if we convert and believe in Jesus Christ, then we're
fine.
Then we're fine. Okay. So then then our status is upgraded to not being in demi status. We can go up and be like everybody else almost.
But all religions who try to convert you, all of them believe that the only way to get redemption, for example, is by following their teachings. You see that in some parts of Christianity and some parts of Islam and other religions that force people to convert or encourage people to convert. That's why Judaism is one of the 3 monotheistic religions, like the big ones, but we don't actively try and convert people. We don't have missionaries. We try to get our own people to practice more or less. That's a whole other topic. But we don't try to convert because we are a tribe, an indigenous tribe. So we get to choose who is or isn't a part of our tribe. And we're not recruiting.
Yeah.
Like, why would any indigenous tribe around the world be like, okay, let's just accept every person who wants to join us? Like, I have Lakota friends from South Dakota, for example, in what is now called the United States. Why would they just accept me as a tribe member just because I think their regalia is really cool or their culture is nice? Like, they would want me to understand the culture, to understand the belief system, to understand that being a tribe member is like being a citizen of a country nowadays. It's not just something that you just do because you want to do that. Like, it's a serious thing. And especially in Judaism, we believe in reincarnation. So we believe that if I'm a Jewish woman, I will forever reincarnate into the body of a Jewish person. So when other non-Jewish people, they choose to join the tribe, not only do they join the tribe now in this life, but they now just set the course for all of their descendants 1,000,000 years from today. And all of them will be Jewish. So it's a very, very big, heavy decision to make, which is why we're not recruiting. We don't want people to just join us because they can, or because it's trendy, or because we have really good teachings. No, like, you can study Kabbalah or Kabbalah in English. You can study many aspects of Judaism as a culture. But if you want to join us as a tribe, as a nation, you have to be prepared to work really, really hard.
That takes several years, actually.
And you get rejected.
You get rejected like 3 times. The rabbi has to reject you or more. Like, you're actively discouraged from becoming a Jew. Like, do you really want this? It's a heavy burden. Why would you want this?
We are indigenous people, and we've been prosecuted for thousands of years.
Yeah.
So, like, we need to make sure that you understand what it means to belong to the tribe, to be a part of us. And all indigenous people have the right to self-determination, but somehow when Jews are concerned, suddenly we don't. So we have the reason I mentioned being Jewish and being Judean is that nowadays a lot of people say, well, your family came from Russia, so you're not ethnically Judean, you're not indigenous because you're not from that land. It's no longer your ancestral homeland because you just, you married a Jew, you became a Jew, and that's it. 2 tricky things about that. One, when do you stop being indigenous? Like, how many decades does it take for people to force you to marry other people and stop being indigenous?
Has an answer for it.
They have an answer for everything.
Yeah.
So how long does it take until someone stops being indigenous? That's question number 1. Question number 2, indigenous people have the right to self-determination. So we get to decide who is or isn't a tribe member. Therefore, if I'm the one making the calls and I'm the one saying, hey, I get to choose who is or isn't Jewish, then I say you are Jewish, therefore you are. And everyone in the tribe has to accept it. And then everyone in the broader society, in a perfect world, should accept my judgment. Same, it's very difficult to explain indigenous stuff unless I explain countries, because that's a lot easier for people to understand. If I want to become a Norwegian citizen, I have to follow the guidelines of the Norwegian government. I have to speak Norwegian. I have to pass a few tests. I have to be accepted by the government as a Norwegian. And the government of Norway can say, no, you're not a Norwegian, and they can reject my application. And people seem fine with that. And people seem fine with Norway deciding who is or isn't Norwegian. And we have many Norwegians who came here from countries that are not Norway, and they're accepted as Norwegian. Suddenly, when you shift that to the discussion about indigenous people, not only Jewish people, but like the broader indigenous society around the world, the communities, suddenly, no, you're white. No, you're not indigenous. But we get to decide who is indigenous. No, you don't. We, the white European scholars, we get to decide who is or isn't indigenous. So you take away our basic right to define who is or isn't a part of us. And that's why I reject the claims of people saying you're a white colonizer. No. My family, they were born Jewish. They were Jewish throughout all time. They were exiled from their home. And then throughout the centuries of being in exile against their will, they married people who chose to join the tribe willingly. Yeah. And that resulted in me looking the way I do today. But they are just as indigenous as people who stay there and never left for a single minute. Just as indigenous. And we have the same rights as other indigenous groups. But somehow when people talk about the whole Israel-Palestine conflict, suddenly only one group can be indigenous, or no one can be indigenous, or Jewish people are white colonizers, because that's the Western understanding of how countries are established, or so many things.
That's because of that latest kind of fad, that trend with intersectionality, where you have this different criteria for victim status, and then Jewish. We're not only white, we're hyper white. We're even above white, like with the least kind of victim.
And most Jewish people are not even ethnically white or like European.
It's so stupid.
We're not.
It's just stupid. But what does it feel like for you to be a part of this indigenous tribe? What does it mean for you to be Jewish and to be indigenous?
So for many, many years, so again, as a Jewish person, we don't necessarily use the terminology of us being indigenous because we just know that we are.
Yeah.
We just know that we are. So for us, and again, in Hebrew, it's the same word, being from the kingdom, the land of Judea, and being ethnically Jewish and being a person who practices, there's a whole like scale of a spectrum of being a practicing Jew or not. It's not a question because we know that we're indigenous. But then when I started talking to international people in 2012 and like properly started to do what we call hasbara, then I realized that people don't understand the fact that we're indigenous. And then I started to learn more about what it means to be indigenous. So nowadays, if people ask me, where are you from? I say Israel. And then I say, I'm an Israeli Jewish woman. However, if I actually sit down and talk to people and I have time to explain it, I will say, I identify more as a Judean rather than a Jewish woman, because I connect more to my tribal identity, to my connection to my homeland, to my people. And I think connecting to that also helps me a lot. Because today we have so many types of Judaism. There are so many ways to practice the belief system, the culture, the religion, everything. And it's very polarized. So for me, like if I zoom out or I find the common denominator is the tribe and the land and the people.
Yeah.
And then how we interpret things, that's up for discussion. So it helps me if I see myself as disconnected from the whole discussion of, am I a bad Jew because I don't observe Shabbat? Or am I a bad Jew because I date non-Jewish people? God forbid. Like, it doesn't help. Like, I want to empower my people. I want to empower all people around the world. And for me, the best way to do that is to connect to my tribal identity and the collective identity rather than, oh, I'm that kind of Jew because I follow this, and that
details,
aspect of the religion. That was also, it's an ongoing, evolving thing.
It's a dynamic thing, right? But what does it mean to you to be a part of this tribe, to be a part of this indigenous people? How does it feel for you? What does it mean for you in your life?
Immense pride. Immense pride. Antisemitism is the oldest form of hatred in the world. It's been around for thousands of years and it doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon, unfortunately. My family has survived everything. Like, people tried to kill us, we survived numerous times. I am a direct descendant of Holocaust survivors. They survived, the only survivors out of entire families that were murdered just because they were Jewish.
Do you know their stories of the ones who?
I know some.
Yeah.
I know some.
Were they in camps and survived there, or do you know what happened?
So my family, like the ones who survived, managed to escape before getting to the camps, but their relatives died in camps.
Do you know where they went to escape?
I don't remember exactly at the moment. No, I just remember that they went. My great grandfather escaped from Czechoslovakia, so a bit Czech, a bit Slovak, and my great grandmother, she escaped from Lithuania, and they ended up in the same camp, like same refugee camp, and then that's how they met, and then they moved to Israel, and they had my grandmother.
Wow.
But yeah, I'm a direct descendant of Holocaust survivors.
Yeah.
And just living in Israel, people tend to think, oh, you chose that land because you really wanted that piece of land.
So stupid.
We chose that land because we had, first of all, that's our ancestral homeland.
Yeah.
And we get to come home after 2,000 years of exile. That's one. Two, we're never safe anywhere else in the world. Like, there isn't a single country in the world where Jewish people are safe, including Israel. Because look, October 7th, look, the Second Lebanon War started on my 8th birthday. I woke up. My mom drove me to school and we heard, like, okay, a war is starting on my 8th birthday. Like, nobody chooses to live in that neighborhood out of their own free will. Like, we live there because we have no other option. We need to survive. We want to survive like every other people, but we also want to thrive. So for me, being Jewish, I'm very proud of my history and my culture and my people for being so strong and so resilient and for making it this far. I'm proud of all of what we have achieved as a group of people for ourselves, but also for society. So many Jewish people have contributed to science and psychology and medicine and agriculture. So many great developments came from Jewish people.
It's so crazy how we're like 0.02% of the world population, and yet we have 20% of all the Nobel Prizes. That's so insane statistics.
But that's also because we are called the people of the book, and the book being the Old Testament,
and people are annoyed by that,
also knowledge.
Yeah.
One of the main things about being Jewish is it's always asking questions, always being curious, always questioning everything, challenging everything, but also seeking knowledge. Because the more you understand the world, the more options you have. So if I understand how anti-Semitism works, I now have more options of combating it, of discussing it with people, of explaining it to people.
Of nuancing it.
So the more knowledge you have, it's not like, oh, we want to control the world, so we have to know everything. But like, you have more options as an individual. You can choose more instead of being forced into action or manipulated into action by different people who have different agendas. You have more control. You have more agency over your own life. And then as a result of that, you have more control and you have a bigger impact on the broader society. So,
in what way do you feel connected to other Jewish people? Do you feel differently connected to other Jews than other people that you don't know? And what is that connection about?
So a lot of Jewish people have this really nice thing. If we see another Jew or Israel, like, oh my gosh, sibling, or like cousin, hello. So overall, I feel very connected to like the people. There are, of course, a lot of people I don't agree with, or I don't, we don't follow the same belief. We don't follow the same agenda. But that's okay. But overall, I usually just click instantly with people because, again, we have a shared history. We have many of us, I can't say most of us, but many of us have the same understanding of how we got here. And then what we believe is the right course of action to change and go from where we are now and change the future and turn it into a better one. And it's a conversation that's very easy for me to have with Jewish people, but also other Indigenous people.
Yeah.
They're the second easiest people for me to discuss those topics with, Indigenous people.
Except when they turn against you.
Exactly. Yeah. And then it becomes even more difficult because they say, I'm Indigenous, therefore I know what other Indigenous people are like. I'm like,
no, you don't.
But you're excluding an Indigenous person. And they're like, yeah, but you're not Indigenous. So, yeah.
Well, what do you feel about? I think there's a mitzvot that talks about the Jewish responsibility for other Jews. Like we have a responsibility to take care of each other. It's
Hmm.
something that you have to do. What do you feel about that kind of sense of responsibility for each other?
I think it's a beautiful concept. Again, if you understand that we are a tribe, you have to survive together. You have to work together to thrive, to build a better future for yourself. Again, like all citizens of a country are expected to contribute by paying taxes, by going to work, by bettering the country. Same. So Jewish people, they take care of one another because that's a part of how we live. That's a part of the culture. So I love that. And that's one of the things I really like about Judaism is that in Judaism, we have like the mitzvot or the good deeds that we're supposed to do. 50% are between one person and God, and 50% is between one person and another. So it's actually really balanced. And it's a very big emphasis on the importance of taking care of one another and like how important society is and how important it is to take care of one another and help one another and be a good human in this life, because of course I'm going to die and reincarnate and like I could have a million lives in theory until karma decides that yeah, I'm done. But you have to focus on what you can do in this life to make everyone have a better life.
That's why I feel like also being Jewish is like being part of a family, right?
It
Because
is.
as you talked about, we can disagree, we can have lots of different opinions, different beliefs, but that doesn't matter because underneath it all, we're still family. So
Mm-hmm.
there's still a connection, there is still a bond. And I've never been in such a community where there's so much discrepancy, so much arguing, so many different opinions. Like they say, if you have two Jews in a room, you have three different opinions, three different dispositions. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like that's the family aspect of it because we still have each other's backs, even though we disagree. Like fundamentally, doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I was reading about Yad Vashem the other day, who are that's like an institution for the memory of the Holocaust, right? For the Shoah.
Mm-hmm.
And they have this prize that they give out, which is called the Righteous Among the Nations. And I read about it, and it's been given to a lot of people for their heroic efforts to save Jews during the Holocaust with their own lives at stake, for doing like these tremendous efforts. And it's never been given out to a single Jew, and it never will. Why? Because that's just expected of Jews. You're supposed to save each other. So a Jew will never receive that award. Like I found that
Mm-hmm.
so beautiful. I was like, oh wow, yeah, you don't get that award even. Doesn't matter if you saved 1,000 other Jews risking your life. That's what you're supposed to do. You don't get an award for that.
Exactly. Like, exactly.
I found that so interesting.
And I think it's great, but it's also really sad that we have an award for people who did not kill Jews and like actively tried to save us.
Yeah.
Like I think it's a shame that society got to a point where people had to save Jews from dying. Like why did we even get to a point where we had the mass murder and the genocide of Jewish people? Yes, I am using the word genocide now.
Yes.
Of our people. Like, how did we get to that point? And I think people nowadays, they tend to say, oh, it's in the past. It's not going to happen again. We learned. We see the exact same behavior, the exact same narratives, and the exact blindness and ignorance from the mainstream non-Jewish population all over the world. And it's happening again. So today we have awards for people who work with Jewish people or work to commemorate Jewish history or Jewish memory. Why do we still have awards for being a decent human being?
Yeah.
Like, why are we as
Yeah,
as a
'cause
human
it's not
society?
expected to save Jews.
Why are we as a human society not over with this already? Like, why? Why are we still here?
Yeah. How do you feel about this? Is perhaps a little bit of a difficult topic. What are your feelings, and how do you reconcile with the fact that some Jews, like especially in Norway, you have this little group of Jews called like Jews Against Genocide when they have these huge plaques. standing outside the prime minister's office saying that Jews committed genocide, and they're openly stating that they are anti-Zionist Jews. How do you reconcile those two facts at the same time? How can somebody be a Jew and be anti-Zionist? And what do you feel about that kind of thing?
So first of all, Zionism. What is Zionism? Because again, people are like, oh, I'm not an anti-Semite, I'm an anti-Zionist. What is Zionism? Zionism, well, one of the names of the land of Israel is Zion or Zion in Hebrew. So Zionism is connected to the land, obviously. Zionism comes from the return of Zion, or the return to Zion. The Jewish people were exiled, one of many times, by the Babylonians, and then in 539 before Christ, so about 2,500 years ago, they got permission to return to their ancestral homeland, to Zion. And then that was labeled the return to Zion. That's where the term Zionism originated. And then Zionism today, it has three dimensions. I like to divide into three parts. We have political Zionism, which is the political movement seeking the self-determination of Jews. And basically Zionism, according to that, means that Jewish people have the right to self-determination, like any other group of people, and we have the right to live in our ancestral homeland. It does not mean we have the right to kick people out who already live there. It does not mean we get to conquer. It just means I get to live there and not get slaughtered. That's it. How do you achieve self-determination of Jewish people in their ancestral homeland? Through political means. That's political Zionism. Then we have religious Zionism. People who believe that unless all of the Jews move back to Zion or the land of Israel, we will not have redemption and the Messiah won't come. So they're religiously motivated to move there. They might not believe in Zionism as a political thing. They might not think, now being Jewish people governing our own people, that's not an important part because we just need to live there. A lot of religious Jews believe that no one should govern the Jews apart from a Jewish king. And since we don't have a king today, they don't accept the sovereignty of Israel, like the governance of a political body that's not a monarch, a Jewish king, which is why they say we're anti-Zionist in the sense that they reject Israel as a political entity and they don't necessarily agree that Israel should be its own state. Like they don't necessarily disagree either. It's just that they wouldn't mind living under Palestinian rule as long as they could live in the land. Because we just have to be in the land. It doesn't matter who owns it or who runs it. We just have to be there. And then there's the thing that I like to call hijacked Zionism, which is what you can see from the criminals in the Israeli government, the right-wing people, Ben Gvir, Smotrich, and a bunch of other lunatics around the world, the ones who justify a lot of their actions by using the term Zionism, completely misinterpreting it, completely butchering the true essence of it, and then doing horrible, horrible things in the name of Zionism. And then people believe that because people want to believe that because, of course, Jews are evil. And people want to believe that because it fits the narrative of Jews being evil, like throughout centuries and also history. You know, there was a war. We won. So, of course, now we are the aggressors. We're no longer the victims that like 7 different armies attacked. We are the aggressors because we won. So the power dynamic changed. So hijacked Zionism is the type of Zionism a lot of people talk about nowadays. And then they say, oh, you know, Jewish people are not indigenous. Therefore, they don't have a right to self-determination. Therefore, they have no special rights to the land. And we don't understand the historical context of why it was established, why Jewish people have nowhere else to go. They should just live wherever in the world they want, free Palestine. And that's very difficult for me to listen to. So when Jewish people say we're anti-Zionist, I'm like, okay, you can believe that you can just live in Israel and be governed by someone else, but you cannot deny our ancestral connection to the land. Like, that's where you came from. Like, 90% of world Jewry have a strong connection to the land. So when people choose to highlight those very, very few voices that are calling themselves anti-Zionist Jews, you're tokenizing Jewish people. You're not listening to the majority of us. You pick and choose whatever narrative fits your own narrative, and you amplify that in order to create a distorted picture of reality.
Yeah.
And that, in my opinion, first of all, is wrong. And then second of all, how is that constructive? If 90% of the Jews around the world were over 15 million Jews, so if 90% of us have a very strong sense of connection to our ancestral homeland, if anyone ever wants to make peace in the Middle East or just stop hating Jews anywhere in the world, you have to see the truth for what it is. You can't just choose that tiny fragment of truth or that one opinion. You have to listen to more people and stop tokenizing us. So all people are entitled to have their own opinions. Again, like we talked about earlier, Jewish people, we tend to disagree a lot and argue a lot. That's a part of who we are. Of course, they can believe whatever they want. But when non-Jewish people take that and tokenize that and use other Jews against the majority of Jewish people, that's what I find very, very disturbing and very problematic.
I feel like that is a part of the mechanisms of anti-Semitism in itself. Like we all seen these pictures, especially on NRK in Norway, when they're like tokenizing by using, this tiny little peripheral group called Nutere Karta in USA. You have these walking around together with the Palestinian activists and saying that they're anti-Zionists and all that, but they're using, like, the mainstream media using that for all the wrong reasons, because they were against Zionism even before 7th of October. It has nothing to do with this war, with this situation, because they believe that the Messiah hasn't come yet, and Jews aren't supposed to live there before the Messiah comes. There has lots of different, complex religious reasons. So they're just using it for whatever purpose they want, and they want to say, like, they want to. I feel like they want to split us into good Jews and bad Jews, right?
Exactly.
Like, here are the good Jews. They're against themselves. They're against the state of Israel. They're against having a homeland. Why can't all you 14.5 million other Jews be more like this little fringe group? Then you can be good Jews too, right? I feel like that is the mechanism of it, like split and conquer, divide us.
And the tricky thing with good Jew, bad Jew, is that Jews are always going to be bad Jews.
Yes.
Even if we're so-called good Jews, we will never be seen as non-Jews or like as a regular part of society. Even me, as a Norwegian, I could be seen as a Norwegian Jew. I will never be accepted as a Norwegian who's not Jewish.
Yes.
Never, ever, ever. And I think that's a problem. But also, that's something I personally got to experience in Tromsø.
Yeah, tell me about it.
After October 7th, life became very difficult, of course. And then in April, I decided to go to Israel for the first time to spend Passover with friends and family, and also, heal a bit. I felt very alone in Tromsø, and I wanted my family and friends. I'm the only one. I always joke about it. I say I have like the full bingo card of being displaced myself, like my family is homeless, having relatives that were murdered, having relatives that were kidnapped, and then being a Jew abroad. So I suffer from anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. So I got the full bingo card covered. So then I wanted to go to Israel to at least reduce 2 out of the 3 factors and just like be with my people. And that was very, very challenging. And I just left after 3 weeks. I couldn't be there anymore. I went back to Tromsø.
Why was it challenging?
Being homeless, it's one thing knowing that your family is displaced, and it's another thing seeing their new place, which they're renting temporarily. And it's a whole thing to know that they're hostages in Gaza and actually be in a country and seeing their names and their faces. Every single street, every single house has a photo of the hostages. Bring them home, yellow ribbons, like hostage tags.
Me too.
Hostage tags, bring them home. And the Hebrew part here says, Halev shelanu shavui be'aza. Our heart is held hostage in Gaza. Like, it's very difficult being there in all of that. Like, out of Israel, I'm very deep into the whole we hate Jews. In Israel, everyone is very deep into this war is bad. We need to bring the hostages home. Like, we are all so traumatized and so in pain. This needs to end now. So being there and feeling all of that, and also being related to hostages, like freed hostages and dead people, like seeing the photos of the remaining hostages was extremely triggering. And I believe that, like, I can't make a difference in the world if I'm doing unwell. So if I want to have a good impact on the world, I need to take care of myself. So I tried taking care of myself by visiting Israel. And then I realized that it was so bad for me right there and then. So I had to take care of myself by removing myself from Israel.
Yeah, I get it. How were your Israeli friends doing? Did you get to visit them while you were there?
I got to visit them. Most are fine. Most of my friends, they know someone who died, either massacred in the Nova massacre or someone who died in the war fighting. But most of my friends, not displaced, not
Are they able
any
to
close
live
relative.
as usual, like with their
Most
work
of
and
them,
their
yes.
studies?
And they're so fortunate. I feel so happy for them that they get to have some sort of resemblance of a regular life. But that was very challenging for me. And then I went back to Norway, tried to be here. I realized, no, I do need my family and friends. I need to heal more. I will try again. And I went to Israel again. And I thought, okay, this time will be better. And it was, until Hania was assassinated. And then Iran threatened to bomb the heck out of Israel. And then I got stuck there because my flight to Norway was canceled. And then a friend of mine said, well, I can't help you leave Israel because there are no flights. What I can do is I can write a newspaper article about you and share your story to make people aware of the fact that Israeli people suffer too. It's not the pain Olympics. Like, no one has a monopoly on pain. Everyone's suffering are people who are suffering. Like, suffering is suffering. Like, oh, you have more suffering, so you deserve more sympathy. No, we need to end all suffering in the world in general. That's also a Jewish concept of making the world a better place and end suffering. So he interviewed me, and then people in Norway realized that, oh, we have a problem. And then
Which newspaper was that?
Local newspaper in Tromsø.
Okay.
And then Norwegian Jews started messaging me saying, hey, we read the article. We now know you're here.
Cool.
And that's how I got to know many of the Jew Israelis up north.
Yeah.
Because I am the only Jew Israeli who openly says I'm Jewish and Israeli and I'm here. The only one in the news. So that's how they were like, oh, we feel the same thing you do. We feel lonely. We feel alone. We feel misunderstood. We need society and community around us. We need the family aspect of being Jewish. You're here. Let's connect. So that was beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And now me and two other brilliant women were actively trying to build the first Jewish community, proper community in Tromsø since the Holocaust.
Wow.
So it's a historic move, really good. But that's why I'm like a well-known Jew nowadays in Tromsø. And that's why on October 7th this year, I was contacted by a local newspaper in Tromsø asking me, would you mind giving an interview and being in an article talking about the last year? And I said, of course, because who else is going to speak about it if not me?
The other two women, are they open about it in society, or are they like a little bit more off the radar?
A bit of both.
Okay.
Again, we have to stay alive. Yeah. So,
I get it.
if they talk to friends, yes. Colleagues, some of them like say that they are, some of them don't. Like, if people ask them, oh, like, are you from Israel? They might say yes, depending on the colleague, depending on the situation.
Context,
but like, no, because we're so scared.
Yeah.
Which is why, like, I'm already known, so I don't mind doing this again and again and again. And also, apparently, people like listening to me talk about things. So, I might as well just use my gift.
After being known in Tromsø as a Jew, have you experienced both positive and negative things as a result of that? Or, yeah, what happened?
So the positive thing is that people recognize me on the street and they come to me like, you're Eden, right? Like, you're here and you're safe. I'm like, yes, I am. I'm like, oh, thank God. I'm like, okay, thank you. I got invited to dinner by a few local Norwegians. A bunch of people reached out to me privately on social media and said, hey, we saw the articles. We want you to know that you're safe here. We love you. We accept you. If you ever want to come for tea or board game night, or you're lonely and it's the polar night, you haven't seen the sun since 10 weeks already.
Yeah.
Like, come to us. You're safe.
Nice.
But then also in the latest article that was published, they also interviewed the head of the Palestine committee in Tromsø. And that's how I connect this to the whole good Jew, bad Jew thing. She said, well, I was asked how do I feel about the demonstrations happening in Tromsø in front of the city center? And I said, well, I worked right next to it every Saturday. So it was very difficult for me to hear people calling for the death of my relatives, or saying crush the Zionists, or Zionist people are evil, or many of those things. So I would love to attend demonstrations and support the Palestinian people, as humans, as people who have the same rights to freedom and dignity and safety and health and education and everything. Same as you, same as me, same as everyone else. However, I cannot support a group of people, not the Palestinians, but like the organization, the Palestine Committee in Norway, who actively partakes in the good Jew, bad Jew thing, and also openly wants to see my people harmed. I can't, with good conscience, join them. And then the head of the Palestine Committee argued with that claim. The journalist presented it to her, and then she replied that, of course, we distance ourselves from all types of anti-Semitism and racism and hatred and blah, 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 blah. We feel bad for all people. You know, the all lives matter, never like we feel bad for Jews or Israelis. No,
Yeah.
all lives matter. And then she said, Eden is very welcome to join the demonstrations whenever she wants. And she's very welcome here as long as she supports the same thing we support. And then her last closing sentence was, it is important to note that not all Jews are Zionists.
Yeah. Like this bad Jew right here. Oh my God.
So I am very welcome to be a good Jew and come as a token Jew to the demonstration and say, I'm a Jew or I'm an Israeli. And I come here as the bad person who was reformed. Now I'm a good person because I'm here, obviously, on the right side of history, saying that, oh, you're right, but I have to agree with everything you say. If I come there and I agree with only a fraction, or I say, I agree with the message of the war needs to end, but I don't agree with how you want it to end, or the repercussions for my family and friends who are in Israel, then I'm a bad Jew. And of course, being Jewish is fine, being Zionist is not. And she just basically, it was ridiculous to read that. I couldn't stop laughing. It was so absurd because she said, we're against anti-Semitism. And then she actively engaged in anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic rhetoric. So every single one of my friends who read that article commented, I sent them the article and I said, tell me what you think. Every single friend, I didn't say anything else. They commented on that last sentence. They said, she just gaslit you. And I'm like,
were these Norwegian friends here in Norway, or did you send it to Israeli friends in Israel?
Everyone around the world.
Around
I have
the world,
friends from many, many countries.
Yeah.
My number one superpower is networking.
Yes.
Again.
Good. Wow.
So every single international friend and Israeli friend and any friends from all over the world who read the same article in English, I sent them the English version, every single one reacted to that sentence.
It's so fascinating how they were, like the Palestinian committee, like especially, but also in Norway in general, how they are just feel like entitled to just define Zionism by their own standards. Like whatever they want to put in it, doesn't matter what we think, is almost equated to like Nazism or something. It feels like, because, oh my God, are you a Zionist? It's like the worst thing you could be in the world. Like,
do you know where that came from?
Yeah, where were that?
Ooh, so after the Second World War, people were still anti-Semites because, again, anti-Semitism has been around for decades, for centuries, for thousands of years. It's not just going to disappear because, oh, now the Jews are fine and alive partially. Like, they need to be protected. So suddenly we all stop hating on them. No. And the Soviet Union had a really big problem. They had a really big Jewish population. But now you couldn't say, I hate the Jews. So you had to find another way to say that. And then on November 10th, 1975, the UN adopted a resolution number 3379, you can Google it later, that openly said Zionism is racism. And they wrote a whole thing of why Zionism is racism, and Zionism is bad, and Zionism is apartheid, and Zionism is this, and Zionism is that. Why? Because you couldn't say that, like, being Jewish is bad, so Zionists are bad, because most of the Jews, 90% of the world Jews, are Zionists. And of course, there are non-Jews who are Zionists, like many of my friends. They believe that I have the right to live in peace and not get murdered. Same as they, same. But apparently, Zionism is racism. And that's where it came from. So the UN adopted that resolution.
That's so crazy because UN, a lot of their reason for existing is because of the Holocaust and because of what happened. And then just like 20, 30 years later, they're adopting that kind of resolution, like switching it all up.
Mm-hmm. So it was adopted in 1975 on November 10th. And then they removed it again. Like they canceled it in 1991. So for 16 years, the UN had an approved resolution saying Zionism is racism, which is why, again, it enables a lot of the people today partake in the whole discourse of the Israel-Palestine thing or Jew, non-Jew, or anything related to Jews around the world. If they say Zionists are evil, it's very easy for people to understand or to latch onto that because, again, it's been around for decades and it has been formalized and approved and seen as normal.
How was it allowed to exist for 16 years without being rejected?
The wonders of the UN.
Yeah.
So then, like, if you understand why people think that Zionism is racism, it's a lot easier to understand why people are saying that, like hijacked Zionism is racist because they see racist people doing racist things or doing horrible things in the so-called name of Zionism. And then they know that Zionism is racism. So you see people doing racist things. Zionism is racism. Ta-da!
Yeah. But how do you feel like, because I feel like Zionism is, if you equate it to Norway, right? It's just the same as saying like Norwegians have a right to live in a country called Norway, where they shouldn't be at risk of being slaughtered and killed every day. Like it's just that. That's what it means to me. Nobody would disagree with that. Like that's not a tall order. That's not a huge requirement. Like that's fair.
But somehow when Jews are concerned, we suddenly don't have a right to live and we don't have a right to exist and we deserve to spend eternity in misery.
And where does that leave us? Because if they say like we have no right to a homeland, then we should be this cosmopolitan Jew that's always on traveling, like has no homeland.
The wandering Jew trope.
The wandering, ever wandering Jew. That's what they want.
So I encountered that in Tromsø as well. People told me free Palestine. I said, I did. I live in Norway now. Like I'm physically out of Palestine. Not to mention that I don't live in Gaza or the West Bank, which is Palestinian territory. Like I live in Israeli territory, but still I freed Palestine. I've done my part. And then a second later they say, but go home. We don't want Jewish people here. And I'm like, okay, I'm a 7th generation Israeli/Palestinian. My great grandfather, Ezrach, he was the first baby born in Tel Aviv, which is why his parents called him Ezrach, because he was the first Tel Avivian citizen. So I'm a 7th generation Israeli. Go back to where I came from, Tel Aviv. Like, again, you have to make up your mind. Do you want me to free Palestine? Or do you want me to not free Palestine?
And what's interesting is that when they're telling you to go home, then they're actively being a Zionist. Because
Exactly.
they're acknowledging that you have a home that is Israel.
Exactly. So, like, the mental gymnastics that anti-Semites do is just, it's admirable, really. Like, if it wouldn't have been something that affected me and my family, my friends, my own safety and security, I would just sit here laughing.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous.
It seems that they don't require logical consistency. They have no need for that. So that's just out the window and they just can make up whatever they want, like with these acrobatics. But who told you to like go back home? We don't want you here.
People I used to know.
In Tromsø?
In Tromsø, yeah.
Oh my God. Norwegian
also,
people?
Everyone. Tromsø is very international.
Really?
We have 150 nationalities in Tromsø. It's pretty diverse. It's pretty cool.
Like people like students, like people at school or... Like
many people.
And how did you respond when they told you that?
Again, I told them, do you want me to free Palestine or do you want me to leave? Like, make up your mind. You know what? I might actually consider doing whichever one it is you want, but like, choose one.
And what did they respond then?
They can't.
They don't know what to say.
They can't because they hate my guts. So they don't want me in Norway because they hate me. But they don't want me to go to Palestine or Israel because they don't want me there either. So they can't answer. They just like, and they can't answer because there is no answer.
Of course, the answer is that every Jew should die. Like, that's what the ultimate goal. Like,
of course.
And we're rid of the Jew problem. Then they're not here. They're not in Israel, taking up wonderful space for the Palestinians. which
controlling
is
the
what,
world, doing
yeah,
everything that's bad in the world.
yeah, perhaps the moon. The moon could be a Jew
You know,
state.
the Jewish space laser thingy.
Yeah. We're controlling that. But Elon Musk is wanting humanity go to Mars. Like he wants 1 million people to go there. So perhaps 1 million Jews could populate Mars.
But then we would be white colonizers colonizing Mars.
So we just spread racism to Mars, like interplanetary racism.
Exactly. You can never win as a Jew.
Yeah.
And that's also something very difficult and something I've tried to explain to all of my non-Jewish friends. I have incredible people in my life, like truly, truly blessed and grateful for all the good people in my life. They don't understand the extent of unsafety that Jewish people feel and have felt for over 2,000 years. Again, I have Norwegian friends. I was like unofficially adopted. I have a Norwegian mom, so to speak. I told her I will never feel safe anywhere in the world. Like in Israel, I will get stabbed and killed. In Norway, as soon as something changes, I will be stabbed or killed.
Yeah.
Or worse. Or like it will take a longer time for me to die eventually. But
My
like,
own family here in Norway was deported by Norwegian police. They gladly helped out to get rid of the Jews.
which of course Norway doesn't like to talk about.
Yeah, that's a big shame, you know. But they
So-
did. It was Norwegian police arrested my great grandma here in Oslo and put her on the boat, the Donau boat, to Auschwitz, and she was killed there 1st of December, 1942. So it's like the rest of my family, fortunately, they fled over to Sweden, which is neutral. So that's why I'm sitting here. But my family lived in Austria and Vienna, and then they saw what was happening in Hitler Germany in 1938. That's why they came up here to Norway, and then went to Sweden and back here to Norway. But it's like almost like this ironic journey. Like it feels like I'm not the end of that journey. Perhaps I have to move somewhere to take my family and move to Israel or something like that. Journey continues, but I was just latching onto what you were saying there. You don't feel safe anywhere. Like the only thing that Israel has that the other countries don't have is that at least they have a government who's on the Jews' side, who wants to protect the Jews. Like that's like part of the reason for Israel to exist is like number one thing is security.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine like that is a difficult topic in Israel after October 7th because that contract in society was breached between the inhabitants of Israel and the government who wasn't able to protect Israelis.
Yeah, absolutely. But even before that, again, as Jews, we like to argue a lot, and we
Yeah,
have a lot
we
of
should.
different opinions in Israel as to how things should be managed.
Yeah.
But yeah, the number one thing is that Israel should be a safe place for all Jewish people around the world, which is why a lot of Jewish people move. I have Norwegian Jewish friends who moved to Israel after October 7th because they
Really?
felt unsafe. Yeah, from
Tromsø?
Oslo.
From Oslo?
Oslo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because they felt unsafe here.
Yeah.
So then I'm trying to explain that to my non-Jewish friends, which are, I would say, the majority of my friends nowadays. Of course, I have all my friends and family in Israel, but I've been away for so many years. So like the people I see day to day are non-Jews. I try to explain that. Like, can you just imagine knowing that at any given moment, someone might just learn where you're from or what religion you practice or what religion they associate you with and stab you? Like, can you grasp that? Can you understand that no matter what happens, you will never ever be safe anywhere in the world? Like, that is a terrifying thought to have, like this existential fear. Now, I am trying to fight that. I'm trying not to feel existential fear every single day of my life, but it pops up every now and then. And especially now in times of political unrest, every time anti-Semitism rears its ugly head, yes, it feels extremely scary. And that's why I always tell my friends, like, you have to talk about anti-Semitism, like, even if it doesn't affect you, because otherwise I might not be here long enough for you to have conversations with me in, like, I don't know, 20 years, 40 years, if you want us to, like, watch each other's kids in, like, I don't know, a while. Like, I'm not going to be here unless you actively try to keep me alive.
And how
do
do
you
they
do that?
respond then?
Most of them say you're right. And then
Yeah.
they say, but we're scared.
Scared of what?
We're scared of speaking up because, one, we feel like we don't know enough about the Israel-Palestine conflict to have an opinion. Then I tell them, but this is not about the conflict. This is about anti-Semitism. Like,
Yes.
anti-Semitism in itself is a bad thing. just say anti-Semitism is bad. No, because then they get, but what about Palestine?
Yeah.
Or what about this? Or what about that? So, okay, they can't win. And if they say, well, Jewish people are suffering or Israeli people are suffering, again, what about? So now you're supporting the Jews or now you're supporting the Israelis, you're a bad person. And they get attacked by their friends, by their relatives, by their colleagues at work. So they tell me, like many, dozens of them have told me, we're scared of posting things online. Like we don't mind having one-on-one conversation with people if it's one-on-one, not a group that can just like turn on us. It's okay if it's one-on-one. And even then, we try not to bring it up on our own. If someone brings up Israel or Palestine or Jewish people, then we speak about it. Why? Because we're scared. And then I tell them, okay, just imagine how scared you feel as a non-Israeli, non-Jew. Imagine what I must be feeling. Me, your friend, don't think about the 15 million of us. Think about the person you know and love. How scared am I to talk about those things? And I have no choice but to do this. Like, of course, I chose to come here to this podcast today, but I have no choice but to speak in order to save my life and to save my friends and family and the tribe. I can't not do this. You have the option. You have the privilege. Use your power. Use your voice. Like, do whatever you can to make sure that the Holocaust doesn't happen again. The Jewish people are safe. All kinds of Jews, even the Jews you don't agree with politically. Like, make sure we're all safe. And they say, you're right, we should do more. And then they don't. Because they're overwhelmed, because they have their own lives, because. And at some point, like, I can't keep pressuring them to do that. But that's also why I had to say goodbye to a lot of people. If you're no longer trying to make sure that I'm okay, inviting me over for dinner is wonderful. But if you're not actively trying to make sure I can have decades of dinners ahead of me, then maybe I shouldn't be spending my time with you. Maybe I should be spending time with people who are trying to make a change in the world.
I feel like sometimes people have a moral responsibility to accept some risk in their lives, right? You can't expect as a human being to never have any risk, like to live a life with 0% risk. It's like, it's scary to be a human being, but fortunately, if you live in Norway, you're a Norwegian citizen, it's not a tall order to ask somebody to take a stance against anti-Semitism. Like, if people are scared, what are you scared of? If you're not Jewish either, like you're just ethnically Norwegian, you're just taking a stance against the anti-Semitism, which should be like the most politically correct and right thing to do at all times. And what are you scared of? Like, somebody might take you for taking a political stance in some kind of conflict. It's like, you're scared of your job, you're scared of losing a friend. Like, that's not enough, I feel, to be scared of that. If we're living in these times that we're living in, and you have a friend who's Jewish, like, you should accept some risk. That is, I think that's a moral responsibility, even though you perceive there might be risks with it.
I agree, and I think us as a human collective, as a human society nowadays, we have a very big problem of values and morals.
Yeah.
As a broad thing.
Yes.
I think we have morals and we have values, and then we don't live according to them. For example, you can say, I'm against slavery, and then you go and you buy fast fashion.
Yes.
Are you really against slavery? I'm against people dying because of genocide, and then you go and you buy diamonds, blood diamonds, and you contribute to the death of people. Like, you have to start living according to your values. And I think now people are seeing that because everything becomes more polarized and everything's becoming more and more dramatic and drastic, and things are moving and things are changing, and there are agents of change on all parts of the scale, of the political scale, of the society scale, all of them. And people are scared because they feel the movement and they get paralyzed because of fear. Because, if you're unfamiliar with something, you freeze or you fight or but they're scared of the change, and they realize that change is happening, and then they have to make a stand. They have to decide, now is the time for me to validate my values or to live according to my morals and values. And it's scary because you realize that the people around you, they don't do that.
Yes.
So if I care about the environment, I'm vegan and I don't buy things that harm other people. I buy fair trade chocolate. I try to live according to my values.
Walk your talk. Right?
Walk your talk.
Mm-hmm.
And now, if you see that every time you speak about, hey, I actually have an opinion, and I do think that like Israel is being mistreated globally, or that Jewish people suffer. Not even Israel, Jewish people in Norway are suffering, and they're scared, and they're attacked like on a weekly basis here in Norway, like one of the best countries in the world. We are being attacked. What do you do as a Norwegian or as a person living in Norway? You talk about it. And if you don't, and you want to talk about it, but you still don't, you're not living according to your own values. And if you talk about these things and you see the people around you, they attack you for it, maybe it's time for you to actually agree to make a change and to rock the boat and to say, well, my value is that Jewish people should stay alive and be protected. If your value is no, they should die, maybe we shouldn't be friends.
Yeah,
Maybe we
probably
don't
not.
share the same values, but people are terrified of that because then they will have no friends. Here in Norway, people say it's very difficult to make friends. So you're going to be alone. Who's going to love you? Who's going to like you?
It's a very conformist society. Everybody
Exactly.
has to be safe with their opinions. Like, what does everybody else mean? Okay, I have to mean the same as them. You know?
And again, this is a Norwegian thing, but this is a broad society thing as well. All over the world, people are scared of rocking the boat
Yes.
because they're scared of change. And now this is me calling everyone who's listening to not be scared of making that change. Like, do the right thing. Stand up for the values and the morals you have and make sure that they apply to all people. Don't say land back and indigenous people's rights and then exclude indigenous people from your activism. Don't say all women have the rights for this, this, and that, apart from Jewish Israeli women who were raped
Yeah.
on October 7th.
Me too, unless you're a Jew.
Me too, unless you're a Jew. Exactly. Like, it's time for all of us to create a better world. And the only way we can do that is if we actively try to make it better. We actively have to distance ourselves from people or causes, organizations, or ideas and ideologies that endanger our vision of a better world for all people. People tend to tell me, like, oh, but like, if I don't talk about anti-Semitism, but I recycle, I still make the world a better place. But anti-Semitism doesn't only affect Jews. It's the oldest form of hatred in the world. But wherever you have anti-Semitism, you also have hatred against gay people and indigenous people and ethnic
It's
minorities
an
and
indicator
disabled people.
for the society that you live in, right?
Wherever you see anti-Semitism, you can expect to see other forms of hatred pop up like mushrooms after the first rain immediately after. Immediately after. So if you actually want to have a better world for everyone involved, fight anti-Semitism. Start with that and then move on to other causes. But like, anti-Semitism does not only affect Jews, it affects everyone.
Yeah, it does. And I think like it's important what you're saying, living according to your values. But that brings up a whole nother dimension, because what are those values? And I think that a lot of people aren't even conscious of what their own values are. They're living like in an unconscious way through life. And I think that's an advantage that religious people have. At least they are conscious of what their explicit values are and what they're living in accordance with. For you, what do you feel like are your most important values in your life?
Well, that's a really good question. Thank you.
That's what I do here.
So I spent years studying with a wonderful group of people from Israel and all over the world. It's called the Luharia Center in English, or Merkaz Luharia in Hebrew. And those are people just like me, wonderful people who try to create a better world for better people, for all people. And we have a set of 24 core values that we believe in, such as, for example, integrity of speech. You have to have, or integrity of thought and integrity of action. Like, you have to think from a place that's pure and not think in a malicious way. You have to speak from a place that's pure and good. Don't do things just because you can. Act consciously, like speak consciously, act consciously. Like, be intentional with what you do. Respect all people. Nothing ever comes at the cost of another thing. Like, life is not a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
And if you see that two or more things can be true at the same time, it opens your heart. It opens up your mind. It makes it easier for you to see the world in all its wonderful complexity. Like, two or more things can be true at the same time.
Is it important for you to live in accordance with the mitzvot also and the Jewish values?
I don't follow like the Jewish 613
Not all of them?
mitzvot.
Really? Are you a bad Jew?
Shocking, I know. I know.
Really? What are you saying?
I know. So to all non-Jews listening or watching us, in Judaism, we have a concept of the 613 good deeds, same number as the bones of the human body. And that's the only way to achieve sainthood in Judaism, is to follow and accomplish all of those deeds. I don't follow them.
It's not possible to follow all of
It's
them.
impossible. And also, like, again, 50% are me and God. And I don't necessarily believe with the current interpretation of God according to like some mainstream interpretations of Judaism as a religion. But in general, I believe in like the broader Jewish values of respect, integrity, making the world a better place, or like leaving the world a better place than what you got. Taking care of everyone.
The sanctity
being
of life.
kind. Yes. Respecting life, respecting one another. All of those. So for me, like the values that are important to me are just respect everyone and accept everyone, but not everyone, accept most people. Do not accept people who try to undermine you.
Yeah.
Like if I invite you to my home and then you want to stab me, then no, I shouldn't accept that.
No.
But you should try to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
And that's like
Be
a big Jewish value and a big value
Yeah.
that I believe in as well in general. And I think like the one thing I always repeat to everyone who talks to me is 2 or more things can be true at the same
It's
time.
so important with those nuances. That's like
Stay
the first thing that
nuanced.
goes in a war zone. Like everything
truth.
goes black and white. Everything is just the nuances are gone. So it's important to keep a hold of those. Keep a hold of thinking in nuance. But in your life, when you grew up, have you grown up with like Jewish traditions and Shabbat on Fridays? In what sense have you grown up with a Jewish culture and religion?
So that's a great question. I come from a secular family. So we're not like religious Jews. We're more like traditional cultural Jews. So we used to light up candles during Shabbat and have like a really nice Shabbat dinner, a bit fancier than the rest of the week. But we don't really observe Shabbat. We don't really care about eating kosher or not. In Israel, it's very difficult, or it used to be very difficult to not eat kosher.
Oh, yeah.
Nowadays, it's changing a bit. So I grew up being a Jew living in Israel, growing up in Israel. I was just surrounded by Jewish people. So like, I didn't feel like something was different. But I was the first one in the family to attend a like semi-religious school.
Yeah.
So it was a democratic school, really cool school, but it was also partially religious. So I got to know parts of Judaism that my parents, for example, they weren't necessarily exposed to or interested in before. And I got to meet people my age with a completely different religious background. And that was a beautiful, eye-opening experience that I will forever be grateful for. And it made me, I'm a very curious person. So it made me want to explore Judaism more as a culture, as an ethnicity, as a religion, all the different layers of Judaism. So going to a primary school that was partially religious gave me the opportunity to at least learn more about Judaism as a religion than many other people in my family or in my friend groups.
Because growing up, did you celebrate most of the holidays, like Rosh Hashanah?
Yeah, we celebrate
everything?
the holidays. Most of the people living in Israel, we do celebrate the Jewish holidays to some extent. It's a matter of, do you follow like the cultural aspect or the religious aspect?
Yeah.
Like, are you going to do all the prayers? Are you going to go to the synagogue?
Yeah.
Do you really think that like this is the day that God saved you from this and that? Or is it more of a, let's gather,
Yeah.
let's have a really nice meal,
Because did you usually
presents.
Did you go to the synagogue much in Israel when you grew up?
As a kid, no, I
No.
don't think my parents took me to the synagogue once. I think my first time properly going to a synagogue, like to pray, was with school. When Jewish girls, when they turn 12, they're considered women, boys when they turn 13. So we had a whole like year of learning exploring our connection to becoming a woman according to Judaism in its complexity. So then they also took us to a synagogue to introduce us to the synagogue, because some of us, we came from non-religious backgrounds. So that was like the first time I actually went to a synagogue, like as a religious experience. That year was also the first year I actually spent the night at a house of an Orthodox Jew. So I got to experience the whole Shabbat, like the keeping kosher, the not turning on and off the lights, like all the different wonderful things of Shabbat when I was 12. Like before that, it wasn't a part of my life.
How has this been for you after October 7th? Because I've talked to a lot of Jews, and it seems like a lot of Jews becoming more interested in keeping the traditions and more interested in the religious aspects, perhaps as a mechanism of staying together, keeping together with your people, and keeping close with the traditions. Like, how has that felt for you after October 7th?
So before October 7th, I used to wear only this
Yeah.
Star of David, the blue one, the small one, because I was scared of people noticing that I'm Jewish here in Norway because of anti-Semitism I experienced in Alta and in Tromsø. And it's small and blue and very not noticeable unless you think of it as a Star of David. After October 7th, I added the second Star of David, which people will think is a Star of David. And then eventually I added the hostage thing as well. Took me a while to get it, but I managed. So for me, wearing the Star of David as a non-practicing Jew, as people would call me, it's not about me, oh, I'm religious now, or I believe in things. It's, yes, this is me carrying my people with me at all time.
Me too.
This is me. Exactly. Oh, you have gold. Nice. Nice.
Yeah, it's being part, and I have this too. It's like being, it feels like being part of your people at all times. Yeah?
Exactly. So for me, because I've had a very long process and journey with my connection to Judaism as a religion, I'm pretty okay with where I am at the moment. So I personally haven't experienced the whole returning to my roots kind of thing, but also I grew up in Israel.
Yeah.
So for you, a non-Israeli Jew, I don't know if you've been to Israel before October 7th.
I'm supposed to go now in March.
Yeah, so like you didn't have the same experience of community and validity.
Yes.
Like you are valid because you exist. That's it. I grew up with that. So a lot of like the diaspora Jews, they always tell Israeli Jews, you have no idea how fortunate you are because you don't have the whole who am I, what am I existential crisis that we do in the diaspora because you just grew up in a place with other Jews.
Yes.
So for me, I didn't have to do as much like soul searching or rediscovering of myself as my other diaspora Jewish friends or like you did, for example, after October 7th. But I definitely feel a lot more pride in how resilient our people are. And I refuse to hide any longer. Like I'm wearing my stars openly and visibly. If I'm taking the public transportation, I usually hide the stars, but I keep the hostage tag out. Again, safety, I can't change anything if I get stabbed. But I openly say I'm from Israel and that I'm Jewish to most people I meet. And I actively engage in conversations regarding the topics I find important because I can't hide anymore. I can't.
What's the reception that you get when you tell people that you're from Israel and that you're Jewish? What's like the different kinds of response that you get from people then?
Sometimes people are very surprised, like, really? You're from Israel? Like, up here? Really? Like, in the Arctic? Like, yep, been here for a while. So they're really surprised. And then a lot of people are curious and they say, we never met an Israeli or we've never met a Jew. Like, you're our first Jewish friend.
Yeah,
like,
can I
talk
touch
to
you?
us.
Like,
exactly.
Are
like,
you real?
They exotify me. They're like, oh my gosh. Or when I lived in Alta, people told me, like, yeah, you're so exotic. You're from the Middle East. And I was like, me exotic? Like, I'm just a regular human, you know? So yeah, like, oh my gosh, you're from Israel or you're a Jew. Like, teach us everything. Which I think is great because they openly admit that they don't know enough and that they're curious. And I think that's a great mindset that they should keep cultivating. And then the other reactions they get are, really? Nah. Or people hear I'm from Israel and then they physically take a step back and say, we're no longer interested in having a conversation with you.
Oh, shit.
They openly say that sentence to my face. They physically take a step back to distance themselves from me. Because again, I can bite because I'm an evil Jew.
Yeah, of course.
They take a step back and then they say, we no longer wish to have any sort of interaction with you.
How do you respond then?
Their choice. And honestly, again, I believe in everyone's power to change reality. If those are people who don't want to talk to me, I can't talk to them. Like
No,
it's
no.
not worth it
No,
arguing with them.
Definitely.
I might as well just redirect my focus and talk to people like you who are interested in hearing what I have to say.
But does it hurt you? Do you feel like it hurts your feelings when that happens, or have you been like
Not anymore.
Not anymore. No.
Not anymore. I'm so used to it by now,
Yeah.
which is something no one should be used to. But
No.
like I am. That's reality of it. I'm used to it, and also I do have such a good group of friends up in Tromsø. Incredible people who support me. Most of them are not Norwegian, actually, but they're there and they're amazing, and they're always with me. Right now, for example, I'm actually wearing a bracelet that one of my best friends made for me.
Wow.
And it's a really cute one with like beads that are very colorful and with a cute flower. And she made those bracelets to all of her friends. So now when you walk around the city center and you see people with this bracelet, like, hey, you know her too? Like, yeah. But I wear this bracelet very often to as a reminder that I'm loved, I'm supported, I have good people in my life. And like it's very colorful and bright. So like there is hope, there is love, there is a better future ahead, and life is good. So yeah, I try to focus on the good. Like obviously my work as an educator is difficult and I have to deal with a lot of negativity, but I constantly try to stay positive and just focus on, is what I'm doing actually going to make a difference or not? If it's not, then I shouldn't be doing it. Like I shouldn't just engage with toxic people online. I shouldn't try to have conversations with people who don't want to listen.
Yes.
I shouldn't read the news if they paralyze me. I should devote my very limited time on earth to supporting the people and the causes I believe in. And I think that's also something that's really important for me in like the whole Israel-Palestine context. I believe a lot of people believe the same thing as you and I. They believe that the war needs to end, the hostages need to return home, Palestinian people have the right to live in safety and security. We believe the same thing. We just have different ways of approaching it. But then posting stuff like saying, oh, Netanyahu is just trying to kill Palestinian children, how is that actively promoting peace in the region? That's only amplifying hatred and anger. That is not helpful. That is not constructive. So people want to help. Again, they have a value that's good. They want to help. They see someone in need. The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah, definitely.
They try. And then they choose the path that leads to hell, quite literally.
Yeah.
So then I urge people to constantly think of, is what you're doing with your life constructive? Is what you're doing helping the causes you believe in? And if it doesn't, make a change. Be brave. Do it. And especially in the Israel-Palestine context, like, if all of you want to make a change. Believe in your power. Like, we have so many people who believe in the same thing. We just argue on how to get there. Let's all unite together instead of spending all the time and resources saying Israel is bad, Israel is horrible. Why don't you listen to Israeli people who live there, who are from there, who have experience dealing with it, who are against several government policies, who actively want to end the war? Listen to us and help us for our own sake. So I hope people listen. I really hope they listen.
I think that's an important way to differentiate between the people who actually want change and the people who are just virtue signaling by thinking they have the right meanings and the right stance in the war between Israel and Palestine, right? And identified with the victims, like, I'm victim too, like, go Palestine, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that the first thing that you should do if you're going to enter into having an opinion about Israel-Palestine is seek knowledge, like read a book or something first before you draw up these huge plaques saying you're against genocide. Like, who aren't against genocide? Everyone's against genocide. Like, nobody wants that. No Israeli or Jew wants genocide, right? So I think that's...
And if they do, if they happen to want that, then they should be removed from society.
Definitely.
Again, the whole value thing. If people undermine our values as society, we need to let them go. We need to move them from society so they can't cause harm. And that applies to all society, all over the world, with all causes. But in order to be able to say what is a good value and what is a bad value, we need to sit down and have a conversation about what our values are.
Yes.
And people are scared of doing that anywhere in the world.
Because a lot of people don't know what their values are.
Exactly. And that's why you see a lot of people doing things like all over the place because they don't have a clear moral compass and they don't have a set of
Yes.
values that they live according to. And that's
And
why you
things have
see
become
things.
so
Yep.
relativistic too, right?
hmm
It's like that whole thing, like, who am I to say what's good and bad? Perhaps your good is my bad, and then vice versa. Like, if you have that kind of attitude where there is no objective good, where there is no objective bad, like then you're able to say like, oh, what Hamas did is just an expression of their frustration and being oppressed for so many years, and that's what's going to happen. Like 7th October, it didn't start on the 7th of October. That was just an expression of the oppressed people of Palestine. Like, then you're able to say things like that because you have a relativistic attitude where there is no moral good, there is no moral bad, and it's just up to you, all of it. And that things can go very astray if you have no standards for what's good and bad in your life.
I completely agree. And we see it all over the world. So again, like in the beginning, I was very angry and frustrated because I felt betrayed. I felt alone. I felt lonely and I felt targeted as an Israeli and as a Jew. And the more I was able to breathe and calm down, I realized that my anger is not because I'm targeted as a Jew. It's because I'm sad and disappointed for the sake of the world, for humanity. Like I grieve every day, every single day for humanity. Because people who are able to believe, not just say, but like actually believe such horrible things, like people deserve to die because this, or that, or committing crimes against humanity is moral. Crimes against humanity are not moral. It doesn't matter who commits them. They are immoral. You cannot justify that. And when people start justifying things like that, then society is in danger. And us as humans, we lose our compassion. And then dangerous things happen to good people. So it's extremely scary. And it's a very sad truth, unfortunately.
I think that's what happens to when people lose that sense of the sanctity of life, where life doesn't matter, where you're just objectivizing everything. And this whole, what do you call it, fetishization of proportionality that everybody's so concerned with. Like, it's almost like a scoreboard. Like, okay, Israel has this many deaths and Palestinians have these many. Like, the proportionality isn't there yet. So
People really like to have things in boxes
yes,
or yes, no, good, bad, because it's easier for them to understand how the world works. And it's easier for them to position themselves. It's not just about understanding. It's about how you position yourself, because we're very selfish creatures, us humans. Your desire to understand the world is like the origin of that is your desire to understand how to relate yourself and how to position yourself in the world. It's very selfish. People are unaware of that. Some are. But this is not a black and white thing. And that also connects to the good Jew, bad Jew. Okay, in Israel, we have a military because it's mandatory to serve in the military, which is called the IDF, Israel Defense Force. It's not Israel Attack Force. The number one goal is to defend the people. Sometimes you need to attack in order to defend. But the goal is to defend the people. And we have the Iron Dome, which is a beautiful system that was designed to keep us safe, and it's mandatory by Israeli law to have a bomb shelter in every single apartment built after a certain year. And every apartment block or every few streets have a bomb shelter. It's a crazy concept. Some countries in Europe also have that. People keep forgetting it because there hasn't been a pretty big war in Europe for a while. Lucky for them.
yeah.
But it's our reality. We actively try to save our people and to keep us safe and alive and prosper. But now people are saying, oh, we only have that amount of Israeli death and that big disproportionate amount of Palestinian deaths. Why? Or Israel is bad because they're not dying enough or they're not dying like in the same numbers. Well, that's because we have the Iron Dome, and that's because we actively try to pursue peace and, like you said, sanctity of life. The situation in Gaza is heartbreaking for so many reasons. And what breaks my heart the most is the cynical use that Hamas makes of its own people. Hamas is the current governing body in the Gaza Strip. They have complete control over everything that happens there. People outside the region and people who don't come from Middle Eastern and or Muslim background, they will never understand the culture and the mentality of us there in that neighborhood. People don't understand that the values we have here in the West, doesn't matter where they came from. The values we currently have and we believe in, they're very, very different from the values and the things that are practiced over there. In the Middle East, if you don't use force, you're not respected. If you don't use force, you will die. That's a language there. Of course, Israel is trying to change that equation actively. But if your neighbor is using force, you're not just going to sit there, roll around, and be like, okay, do whatever you please. No. If they speak using force, we have to respond in the same language they understand. We have a dialogue. Unfortunately, force and force. And Hamas, unfortunately, they're making a horrendous, cynical use of their own people. They openly say in interviews in English, we want to see dead Palestinians because it will further our Palestinian cause and demonize Israel. If Hamas leaders openly say that, if Hamas openly says, we have built the tunnels underneath Gaza to protect Hamas militants and members, and not the people of Gaza, it's the UN and Israel's responsibility to ensure the safety of Gazan citizens. You are the ruler of Gaza. It's like the Norwegian king will say, oh, this palace or like this country is only here to save me as the king and not the 5.5 million Norwegian citizens here. No, it's the European Union or the United Nations that have to ensure the safety of Norwegian citizens. It's complete. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. And the world listens and the world believes that. And the world doesn't call out Hamas for their atrocities. And people don't understand why they're doing what they're doing, how they're doing what they're doing, and why, you and I, we don't want to see dead Palestinian children. But they actively try to maximize the number of dead Palestinian children and women and everyone. All lives matter in that sense. So they're actively trying to reach an end goal that's different from the end goal that's desired by most people in the West at the moment. So you have to listen to them. There comes a point in time where you're like, okay, if Hamas openly says we want to kill all Jews and Israelis wherever they are in the world, and we're actively going to use our women and children and houses and the money we get from you, the international community, to commit crimes against humanity, against our own people, leave the Israelis alone. Women in Gaza are not allowed to leave their homes without a male supervisor. Like, there was a story of a woman in Gaza who opened a hair salon and Hamas members came and cut off one of her ears because they said that beauty is vanity according to Islam. Yeah. Like, they want to help establish an Islamic caliphate. They don't care about the same values we have in the West. They kill gay people. They kill their own people if they think that they might not agree with the same ideology they have. They're dangerous, radical people. You have to listen to them. You can't keep saying, well, but not all Palestinians are Hamas. Obviously, the majority of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank combined and in the diaspora, they're not Hamas, of course. But that's why you have to openly distance yourselves from Hamas. You have to listen to what Hamas is saying. And then you have to say, well, as a Palestinian or as a person who cares or as like literally anyone who cares, we have to say Hamas is bad. We need to fight Hamas. We need to end this to save Palestinian people. And somehow the mental gymnastics happening now is, oh, Hamas are freedom fighters. They're killing the people you're trying to save. How come you support them?
Yeah, I think that is the mechanisms of that, I think, is because, like, if you take example from Norway, that's our Norwegian lens to see this thing through. Like, that's the only way we could ever justify being on the side of Hamas or the Palestinians in that sense after October 7th. Like, is that the only way to support that if you're saying like, oh, they're the freedom fighters. It's like these people fighting against the Germans here in Norway when they came here. They're fighting for freedom. They're the oppressed groups. Like that's the only way you can rationalize it. As I think there's a lot of rationalizing going on. And I also feel like the reason that so many people are so upset for the Palestinians being killed, like, obviously, I get that, but I think that there's a lot of emotional hijacking going on, right?
Absolutely.
Because, as you said, Hamas, they have a whole PR division. They are spending lots of money, our Norwegian money, tax money, making this seem as horrible as possible, literally kicking children in harm's way out in the crossfire, literally in the crossfire, because they want to see Palestinian civilian lives killed. Like, a lot of people won't even believe me when I say that, but that is the truth. They want to see Palestinian lives killed because that will demonize Israel. And people are just falling for it. In Norway too, they see that, and of course they are emotionally hijacked if they don't believe why that is happening. So I feel like Norwegians seeing that, who have no concept of the war and don't know anything about it, they see Palestinian civilian kids getting killed, and of course they're upset.
I'm upset too.
How can we allow that to happen? But I think there's an attribution error going on, because they're placing the blame on Israel instead of placing the blame on Hamas, who are actually doing that, who wants that to happen. That's the part they're forgetting. They're just going automatically from saying, oh my God, children are killed. Oh, bad Israel, right? Demonize Israel.
I just love the nitpicking they do. It's like, it's so selective. Again, if it wasn't my life, I would just laugh because it's so absurd. They listen to whatever they want to listen to by whomever they want to listen to. So when Israel says we're trying to maximize the ratio, like we're trying to minimize the ratio between civilians and militants, like we try to preserve as many Palestinian lives as possible, suddenly you don't listen to us. But when Hamas openly says we want to maximize the number of civilians, we want to kill, Hamas, we are going and killing our people on purpose. No, they have different values than us. No, we don't believe them.
They don't know what they're saying.
They don't know what they're saying. They openly say that. So Israel, which is a Western country, like it's Middle Eastern, but we have Western values. It's a democracy. The only properly functioning, stable democracy in the Middle East has its flaws. Definitely does. God knows I criticize it very often. But it's a democracy and it's functioning, and it's a country where people can be free from many, many other things that people can't do in the Middle East. The broader Middle East. And people don't understand that. And it's absurd that when Israel says things, people are very quick to judge or blame or choose which aspect of it they believe. But when Hamas says, this is the fact, or that's the number of people who died, or that's the ratio of women and children within all the people who died since the beginning of the war, or we want to kill Palestinian children, like suddenly you choose which aspect of Hamas words you want to believe. It's absurd and it's infuriating and it's wrong, and this needs to end. Again, because I care about Palestinians. I have friends from Gaza. I have friends from the West Bank. Palestinians. I want them to have the best life possible. Because I care about them, I have to be against Hamas. To save my friends, I have to speak up against Hamas. All of you who want to save Palestinian people have to be against Hamas and against Islamism. And you have to start caring about human rights for everyone. And you have to focus on the truth and not let yourself be so easily emotionally and mentally manipulated. Like, start to think critically, check your sources. Start thinking, who is benefiting from me thinking a certain way? Why are they benefiting from it? What are they getting from it? Like, think.
Follow the money.
And not just that, but just like think. And people, they don't think anymore.
But these friends you're mentioning from Gaza, do they still live in Gaza, or have they migrated to Israel, or where are
So
they?
I have some Palestinian friends from Gaza who live abroad. And I used to have Palestinian friends from Gaza, and I managed to speak with them very briefly at the beginning of the war, and we lost contact. So I don't even know.
Do you remember what they said? What kind of attitude did they have towards this?
I think it was in 2014. I don't remember which military operation it was. I think it was 2014, Tzuk Eitan, if you're not mistaken. I had a Gazan pen pal, and she lived relatively close to one of the hospitals. And then the IDF targeted the hospital because Hamas used it to store weapons and ammunition, which, according to international law, by the way, to all the people listening who don't have a legal background, as soon as you store weapons and ammunition in any building, including buildings that are supposed to be protected, like schools, religious buildings, hospitals, like relief buildings, as soon as you do that, you, the person storing the ammunition there, you are responsible for that place losing its protection under international law, and you openly validate it as a military target.
Yes.
As soon as you do that, you are the one making it a valid military target. And again, Hamas is doing that because they know that in Israel, we value life. So we're not going to want to bomb a hospital unless we absolutely have to, because we want to save Palestinian lives and Israeli lives.
And the rules has to be that way. And the reasoning is that if it wasn't that way, then you would encourage like these military states or terror organizations to actually do that, because they would know like, you can't touch us because it's under a hospital.
Exactly.
They would encourage that kind of behavior.
So I had a friend who lived relatively close to one of the hospitals that were bombed in one of the many, many former rounds that we had of crossfire. And she sent me a message and she said, yeah, well, we hear the bombs falling and it's really scary. And we have to sit far away from the windows and we have to put blankets on the windows. So the shards, when the window eventually will break, so the shards don't cut us. And it's scary, but so far we're alive. And she said, my family and I, we understand why Israel is doing what it's doing. Obviously, we don't like this and I'm scared and I'm annoyed, but like I understand why, because I disagree with Hamas. Yeah. But I can't openly say that because I will get murdered, and not just me, like all of my family and friends will get murdered and in front of my eyes, and then I will get murdered. So like I will suffer immensely before I will die, because that's how cruel Hamas members are. They want to maximize suffering of people, even their own people, for their own political and financial gain, which is absurd. So my Gazan friends, they want life just as much as I do, but they can't speak up because they will die. It's an impossible situation that they're in, which is why I have a lot of empathy and sympathy for them. Like all death and all suffering in the world should be avoided as much as possible. But we are in a situation that is crazy. And the responsibility is not on Israel because we're the bigger force and we have a bigger military, or we are an actual, like we're an established state, and Palestine is it's not recognized as a state and it's divided into two parts. So they're the underdogs. No, the one entity responsible for October 7th and everything that is going on in the Gaza Strip since Israel withdrew one-sidedly in 2005 is Hamas. So people need to hold Hamas accountable, and people, again, they need to see the truth in order to make a difference. If you can't see that something is happening, if you don't see the truth for what it is, how will you be able to make a difference?
Have you gotten the impression of what Gazan people, like the ones you were talking about, their friends, what do they want as an outcome? Have you ever, what do they see as a solution to all of this? Do you know what they wish for, what they want?
Some of them told me, we just want to be a part of Israel because we know...
Like a two-state solution? Or
no, we want
state?
one state solution. Again, I just need to make this very clear. I'm not speaking on behalf of the Israeli government or the Jewish people or the Palestinian friends I have. I speak as an individual. All the opinions here today are my own and based on things I have heard from other people. Some of my Gazan friends and some of my Palestinian friends in general, they want to live under Israel, under Israeli rule, because they know that Israel is a democracy and it's functioning. And Israel, in its founding document, it stated there that Israel will be a Jewish, democratic Jewish state. So it's a very interesting thing where Israel is both, it should in theory be equally Jewish, so a religious state, which has its own issues, and democratic, so the values of democracy that we have in the West. And they know that. So they don't mind, sort of like the people who say, like the Jews who say we can live in Israel, we don't care if it's Israel or Palestine. They say, we don't care if it's Israel or Palestine as long as we have the freedom to do whatever. And our best chance at freedom is under Israel. Because in Israel, Israeli Arabs or Israeli Palestinian, they identify in many ways. They have equal rights as I do. They have the same passport. They have the option of living anywhere they want. We have Israeli Arabic lawyers, members of parliament, doctors, scholars, professors at university. Like, they're everywhere. And they're doing amazing things for their own community and for the broader Israeli society as well. They're an integral part of who we are. Over 21% of the Israeli population is Arab. So also when people say boycott Israel, I'm like, okay, but you support Palestine, so you're boycotting like millions of Palestinians living in Israel just because they live on the wrong side of a man-made border? Like, is that it?
Which makes it also so stupid when people in Norway are walking around saying like, it's an apartheid state.
They have equal rights. It's not apartheid. We have problems. I'm not going to lie. We have issues and problems, but all countries do. Yeah. Even in Norway. Like, I'm not going to bash Norway here, but like Norway has. I still live here. I need to stay here for a while at least. But like Norway has issues.
Yeah.
Norway's not perfect. So when people criticize Israel and only Israel for doing things, I'm like, okay, well, criticizing Israel is valid if you only criticize Israel and you don't uphold other nations to the same values, but you only make sure that Israel upholds them. You might be an anti-Semite.
Yeah.
You might be an anti-Semite. Like, I'm not saying that you are. You can also just criticize Israel. I do too. But just be very mindful of when you criticize Israel, why you criticize Israel, what you criticize Israel for, all of those things. So yes, it's complicated. And yes, my Palestinian friends, a lot of them say we want a one-state solution under Israel because in Israel, we can be Muslim and Christian. Like, what happened to the Christians in Palestine and Lebanon and all of the Middle East? They used to live there for centuries before Islam. There were Christians in the region before Islam. 600 years before Islam even became a religion, there were Christians in the region. Ethnic Middle Eastern people who believed in Christianity. What happened to them?
Yeah.
No one talks about that. No one talks about Islamic imperialism and colonialism. No one talks about that. But that's like a whole other thing. But my friends know that they have freedom of religion in Israel. They can choose to have a religion or not have a religion in Israel. And they will have a democracy with flaws, but a democracy. And they will not have that in a crazy religious state. Like you see in Iran or in Afghanistan or in other countries in the Middle East and all over the world. They are terrified of having the same fate, which is why they want to be a part of Israel. I have other friends, Palestinian friends, who want a two-state solution. I personally, I think it's very complicated. I also believe in a two-state solution. I think that way they can have more control over their own narrative and their own self-determination in their ancestral homeland, and they can shape society as they want. But it needs to be like the European Union, so there needs to be a Middle Eastern Union. We need to be able to have the same currency and cross the border and cooperate together to build a better, stronger community and society in the Middle East. But they should have their own governance and their own bodies that will help them achieve their goals and dreams as a nation. Not the crazy let's kill all the Jews, kick them out goals, but the let's build a better life for all of us. So a lot of my friends also believe that. And I believe that. It's complicated. It's difficult. I don't have the solution to everything. But I think that is a very good start.
I think it was, I spoke to Samuel Hyde here earlier. He was here in Norway and on my podcast. And he has worked closely with Einat Wilf, who's written this book, The War of Return. And I think he told me that, I think it was, I'm paraphrasing, but Einat Wilf had this idea. I think it was her. I'm not going to say for certain, but I think it was her who had this idea of a solution to it all. With the idea was that splitting Gaza into two zones, like A and B, and saying that A is controlled by Israel, and here we won't have any Hamas, we won't have anybody being jihadists and killing Jews and being terrorists and everything. This is controlled area by Israel. And the Palestinians who want to live free lives and not being areas that are bombed and whatnot, they can just move up here. Within Gaza, you can just move up here and you're safe. This area won't be bombed. This area won't be any war zone. And then you have area B, where if you're a Palestinian and you concur and you agree with the Hamas ideology, then you can choose to stay there. But then you are considered a combatant and you will be subject to IDF bombing and war zone and fightings because you choose yourself to stay there. And Hamas obviously will stay there. So by splitting those two areas apart, then you can choose yourself as a Palestinian whether or not you want to be exposed to the war.
So I have never heard of that solution, but I think just hearing of it now, I think, well, what I believe in personally, again, my opinion, is that we need to be very creative with the solutions we come up with.
Yeah.
We can't just say one state, two states. Like, we have to be creative and we have to address the nuances and the complexity of the situation. And I think it's very important that people actually try to come up with solutions, like long-lasting solutions to the situation.
Definitely.
So I think all people who say that they care about Palestinian people and all people who say they care about Jewish people and Israeli people, I think we all just need to really start to use our brains and just think of solutions. Like spend all of our time and energy thinking about how can we solve this long term. What's our vision for the Middle East 100 years from today?
Definitely.
Not just like now, let's end this now. 100 years from now, what do you want this to be like? And actually, there's a very beautiful music video. I don't know if you watch it. It just came out a couple of days ago. It's by a singer called Yanni Bloch. And in the video, he used a lot of AI to create this sort of utopian Middle Eastern future where the hostages come home and there's peace between Israel and Palestine, and the entire Middle East is in peace. And we have like the Middle Eastern Union, and people can take a train to visit the pyramids in Cairo, and people can just fly to Tehran, and life is good, and we have the same currency, and we have like open borders, and everyone's happy, and we go to the Olympics and we fight each other, and we play games, and life is good. And I think we need more of that. We need to imagine a better future. We need to visualize it and manifest it. And then after we have an image of that, believe that it can come true. We have to believe. Hope is the most powerful tool we have. And hope, Nadav, may he rest in peace, my relative who was murdered, he had a sentence in Hebrew, Hatikva meta achrona. Hope is the last thing to die. Hope is the last thing to die. We have to have hope, and we have to have a better vision for the region and for the world. Like we have to have that. And that's a sentence I've been carrying with me every single day since October 7th. Like in memory of Nadav and Yam, hope is the last thing to die.
It's beautiful. You should have that inscribed on
I
like
actually should. So there are
something.
stickers. There are a lot of stickers around the world of the victims of October 7th, and Israeli people just stick them everywhere. And there is a sticker with that quote.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. We should definitely make like T-shirts and merch with that sentence in Hebrew and in English.
Because
Hope
that's
is the
something
last
that
thing to
everybody
die.
can stand behind and respect, right?
And also hope, according to science, hope is an actual
yes.
cognitive state of consciousness. You can actually cultivate hope. You can increase hope. And hope is, if you talk to Holocaust survivors or you hear their testimonies or any people who have gone through very difficult times, hope is what kept them alive. Hope, not love, not faith, hope. If you boil it down to one thing, it's hope. So we all have to have hope. We can't let ourselves be swayed by emotions or by the media or by anything. We have to stay strong and resilient, all of us as humanity, and we have to have hope.
Yeah, because you feel it just in the language, right? In the English language. If you talk about a friend and you're talking about her saying that, oh, she only feels hopelessness nowadays. Like you understand how dark that is to feel hopeless. Like not only, because that's twofold, not only are you suffering right now, but in addition, you feel like it will never be better in the horizon either. So that's like twofold suffering. So at least if you're suffering now, but you're seeing that there's hope, then at least that lightens up a little bit. But we have to talk about the hostages. What do you feel about the hostage deal that was announced yesterday? What do you feel about that?
Well, I have many feelings and many thoughts and emotions. I'm not going to say anything until they actually come home. It's so complicated. I think Israel as a country has the right and duty and obligation to do everything in its power to bring its citizens home back to safety. I think Israel is just doing whatever it can to bring its people back. Some people are criticizing the government. They're saying that the deal is not good for Israel or that the deal is bad or it's a surrender to Hamas. I don't know. I am not going to address that. All I'm going to say is that Israel has the obligation to bring its people back, and every family deserves to be able to breathe again. I still can't breathe because of my family being in Gaza for 51 days, and it's been a year and a bit since they returned, and I still can't breathe. Me, a relative of people who have, like, not even immediate family, but like a relative of someone in Gaza. I can't even imagine what the families are going through right now. I do not wish to imagine what they're going through right now. It's so horrible. They need to return home. The living need to, in whichever condition they're in, they have to return home safely in one piece, or which however many pieces of them are left. And the dead need to be buried properly. There needs to be closure, and there will never be peace in the Middle East before people return home and they get buried and respected. In all countries, according to whoever believes what, people need to have closure before we can open a new chapter.
Yeah.
So my belief is that there will be no new chapter before we close this one. And if this is something that helps us close this chapter, so be it.
Yeah,
But
it's
again,
like an open wound, right?
there's so many layers to this hostage deal. So again, I can't say anything until it actually happens. But there has to be a solution, and there has to be an end to the war at some point. Luckily for me, I'm not one of the decision makers. I'm not one of the politicians, so I don't have to figure out how to do it. But my own personal opinion is that whatever ends this war, ends it properly, and plants the seed for everlasting sustainable peace, keyword being sustainable
Definitely.
peace, is welcome. Anyone who has ideas, who wants to contribute, is welcome. But there has to be peace. We cannot continue the situation. People can't keep dying, can't keep suffering, can't keep living in such a polarized society. It has to end. For the sake of us in the Middle East affected by this, for the sake of the world, for the sake of humanity, for the sake of literally everything, for the climate, for the animals, for everyone, there needs to be peace.
Were you in the IDF yourself also? Yeah.
Yes, mandatory service, so
Yes.
I had no choice.
Yeah.
But yes,
What was your experience like being in the IDF?
full of learning and growth, I would say. I had my hardships there. It's a difficult system to be a part of, can be very challenging. But again, being a very optimistic, positive person, I try to take everything as an opportunity for growth. I got to meet incredible people from all over the Israeli society. Again, like Israeli Arabs and Bedouins and Druzi and Orthodox Jews. Like one of my best friends today, she's an Orthodox Jew. She now lives in Jerusalem. She just had her first kid. Like, so happy for her. We met in the military in 2016, and we've been really good friends ever since. So I would never have had the opportunity to meet her if it weren't for the IDF. And again, our main focus is Israel Defense Force. It's defending the people. So I didn't go there thinking, oh, I'm going to fight people. No, I went there because I had no other choice. It's mandatory. And then while I was stuck there, I decided to do whatever I could to make the situation better for myself and other people around me. And I made really great friends. And I challenged the way I thought and understood Israel as a society, and even Judaism. And it was a wonderful, wonderful learning opportunity for me that I would never have had if it weren't for the IDF. But of course, in a perfect world, my dream, my wish is that we would need a military. Every child in Israel, like they grow up and in kindergarten, they hear their parents say, like, by the time you graduate high school, there will be no war. Every Israeli child hears that. And then they graduate high school and they're forced to join the military because no one else will save us apart from ourselves. And then some of us, we live, and some of us, we die. Because otherwise, all of us will die. And it's a horrible situation. So my wish is that no one will have to go to the IDF anymore. That there will be no need for an Israel Defense Force. That we wouldn't be attacked by so many people from all over the world. Like that's my biggest wish.
Like right now, Israel is attacked on 7 fronts at the same time, I think.
Mm-hmm. Something like that,
so
yeah.
Crazy.
And again, of course, we are the aggressors.
Yeah, of course. Like you could flip that around, like the mental gymnastics that people do is like almost like they're saying like, Israel wouldn't be attacked on 7 fronts if there wouldn't be evil, right? They must be evil because otherwise people wouldn't be attacking them. They wouldn't care to attack them. Like that just goes to show how evil they are. Like 7 different countries are attacking them. Like they're that evil? Yeah. It's like
Of course.
It's rationalizing.
Yeah.
But tell me about the future, because you told me a little bit about on the phone about a company that you're starting up and some interesting things that you're going to do.
Yeah. So I was recruited. Again, my number one superpower is networking.
Yes.
I was recruited by a friend of a friend of a friend, and I'm now helping a really cool startup company in Israel to fight anti-Semitism on a global scale. And we're creating an app and a website that's going to use really advanced intelligence methods in order to help keep Jewish people safe all around the world. Right now, the diaspora Jews, we don't really have a network of or a way to connect the different communities in the diaspora in terms of security. Each community, if there is a community, each community has their own security mechanisms and organizations and companies that keep it safe. But it's very difficult to tackle threats as a unified thing. We don't have one unified body like the Shin Bet, like the Israeli General Security. So we don't have that. So we wish to create a general security company or agency or body for the diaspora Jews to keep us safe.
Do you have a name for it yet?
We do. We're called PALSAR. We still have to finalize a few things and register and talk to lawyers and stuff. But then as soon as we're registered and we're good to go, we're going to start looking for investors and hopefully be the next big startup coming out of Israel.
Cool. What does that name mean, PALSAR?
So PALSAR in Hebrew, it's Plugat Siyur. It means the scouts or the people, the soldiers, or like the rangers, the soldiers who go out and gather the information from the field, and then they bring it back, they analyze it, and then that ultimately translates into action plan.
Reconnaissance.
So that's essentially what it means in Hebrew. In English, you can call it PALSAR, like the way I pronounce it, or PALSAR, or whatever.
How do you spell that in English?
PALSAR.
So it's going to be PALSAR.
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 Yeah, PALSAR. So we're going to be PALSAR.
PALSAR.com.
PALSAR. Something. I don't even know. But I'm very, very excited.
Cool.
As you know, I am dedicating my life to make the world better for everyone. But my number one focus is Jews and fighting anti-Semitism. So this is a wonderful opportunity. We're a team of wonderful people. I'm so lucky to have this opportunity to work with them and do whatever I can to contribute to PALSAR becoming what we hope it would be one day.
I hope so too. That would be amazing if you're able to manage that. Of course, you will be able to manage it, and what you can do with that, protecting Jews in the diaspora and everywhere, and being able, probably using, I'm just speculating, probably going to use big data, probably going to use statistics, probably going to use AI, and to be able to predict before something happens, before some terror attacks happen, before this kind of
which
way.
will be a game changer.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because right now you see a crazy increase in anti-Semitism, and that's also something people don't understand. If you look at historic trends, and if you actually do the research, you see that every time there has been a war and or military operation in Israel, between Israel and any entity, including the Second Lebanon War in 2006, for example, every time Israel is involved in warfare, you will see a spike in anti-Semitism. And then after the war ends, it will go down, but never to the level it was before the war. So there is a constant increase in anti-Semitism, constant, throughout decades.
And if you zoom out, then you can see the long-term trends of this. And if you see that as a wave function, then you can see that, we're about to head into a new wave at some point, right?
Exactly, but the waves, they never go down properly all the way down, ever. When anti-Semitism is concerned, they go almost down, and then they go up again, and then a bit further up and up and up. So the threshold for anti-Semitism is it's becoming more and more acceptable and more tolerable to be an anti-Semite and to endanger Jews around the world. And that is the global trend. Like you said, with the waves and everything, the waves never go down. It's not the war is over and now Jews are safe. After every single war that is forced upon Israel by external forces, after every single war that's imposed on us, where we have to defend ourselves to survive, we see that Jews around the world suffer, and the suffering only increases and stays at a very high level after every single war, which is why we see the need for our company to exist, to fight that and to make sure that the aftermath, the aftershock of wars in Israel or anything. Every time Israel is involved in anything, every time Israel is discussed, people target Jews. People do not have the understanding of Israeli people being different from the Israeli government and Jewish people being different from Israeli people. Again, 21% of the Israeli population is Israeli Arab. They're not Jewish. They're Israeli. Are you going to demonize them too? Or the Jews who were born and raised in Norway, like yourself, you've never been to Israel, you have nothing to do with the Israeli government. What makes them think that you have any control over that? People don't understand that. So our hope as a company is that we will be able to use our tools and methods and platform and everything we're creating right now, brilliant stuff, honestly, to make sure that Jews are protected and Jews are safe around the world, and that we can prevent things from happening before they happen. Right now, people are usually reacting to already existing threats. We want to find those threats before they happen.
Brilliant. I tried to use ChatGPT for doing that the other day. I was asking it like, yeah, you're an expert in political analysis, and given the trends and the history of pogroms against Jews and massacres, when would you predict that the next large pogrom against Jews would happen based on the past? And then like gave me a wave. I asked for it as a wave function, and said that we're overdue actually for a new pogrom based on past massacres. So I think that it's important to have that kind of work. So I would encourage, if you're an investor or somebody with some money or a millionaire, check out PALSAR.com or something when it will arrive, and you should really invest in that, because that would be a game changer. If you're just able to save one life doing that, and then it'll be worth it.
And our main goal is actually to use that platform and increase it and develop it so much that we don't only focus on Jewish lives, but all communities. You know, if you have an ethnic minority that's suffering from hate crimes against them, you can buy our platform. You can use our platform to create your own databases and then save yourself.
Nice.
And then promote peace and security for your own people. So our vision is a global vision. But again, we have to start somewhere. So we're starting with something we understand very well. We understand how the technology works, and we understand anti-Semitism very well. Again, I'm part of the team, the core team, because I understand anti-Semitism very well. So we can have the right solution to the problem that we see. But our main goal is to actually, like our long-term goal is to promote safety and security for all people around the world by developing a platform that's so good that other people from other communities or other minorities or other people in despair could use it and regain control over their lives and be safer.
Wow.
Of course, me as an individual, I'm also working in another dimension, trying to just make the world better by decreasing the level of insecurity people experience. But, you know, you have to be realistic. So that's why I'm working in both directions.
Yes.
But our long-term goal is to be a platform for everyone, not just Jews.
Best of luck with that. I want to keep in touch with you and listen to how that work is going. And I'm really interested in seeing when you're launching this and see the response of it.
I will definitely let you know as soon as there's something to properly publish. I will let you know. And
thank you.
Yeah,
that's great. Now, Eden, it's been wonderful to have you here. We're pushing it up towards 3 hours now, so I think it's time to go in for landing. But I wish you best of luck. And when are you going to go back to Israel?
Well, thank you so much. I don't know. I'm probably going to move back to Israel when I graduate from my degree.
Yeah.
I have plans of visiting before that, but I don't know. It depends on the war situation. Depends on whether I could leave Israel if I want to, because I do have to write my thesis and graduate at some point. Hopefully sooner rather than later. But after Norway, after I'm done here, I think I want to move back to Israel. By the time I will move back to Israel, it would be 5 years of being away from my closest friends and family. And we all need to heal as a society, as people, as a nation. And I want to be with my people when we heal together. And
Beautiful.
I want to work in Israel for an Israeli company to help Israeli people have a better future.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming, and Am Israel Chai.
Am Israel Chai, and hope is the last thing to die.
Amen.